order. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the board in preparation of the 2023 annual meeting notice, which sets forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by properly posting such notice and forwarding the notice to those designated newspapers and persons requesting meeting notices. Please be advised, this is a non-smoking building. Fire exits are to my right and your left and at the back of the room. This is a scheduled meeting of the planning board. There may be other meetings running currently with this meeting. If you are not here for the summer planning board, your meeting may be upstairs or elsewhere in the building. All right, so we go to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Stephanie, want to read our roll?
Sure. Chairman Anderson?
Present.
Mr. Brinkerhoff?
Present.
Ms. Balston Alvarez is excused this evening. Ms. McNeil? Here. Mr. Delory?
Here.
Councilmember Miniger?
Here.
Vice Chairman Zucker?
Here.
Mr. Formicelli?
Here.
Mr. Stern?
Here.
Mr. Bell?
Here.
Mr. Hillebrand is excused this evening. You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Thank you very much. All right, so first item on the agenda, we have a couple of meeting minutes, May 22nd of this year. And anyone have any questions? I had one or two questions, but if anybody has any questions and get to it before me, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have one minor comment I'd like to offer. With regard to 39 Beechwood Road, Dr. Samaro committed to purchase parking passes for his employees. It's reflected in the resolution accurately.
Yeah, right.
I think we were concerned enough or interested enough in the parking situation that we discussed that, accepted that. I think it's an appropriate response, but perhaps the minutes should reflect that.
I think that's a great idea. Thanks, Jay.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Stephanie, I had one question in the first paragraph. I got a little bit confused, but I'm confused easily. So it says the property is in Zone B. Dr. Samaro rents 1,750 square feet, which allows him to utilize one parking space for every 150 square feet. I'm just wondering if that should read, which requires him to provide rather than allows him to utilize. I don't know if anyone sees that. Maybe I'm dreaming here. So we'll say which requires him to provide one parking space for every 150 square feet.
Okay.
So then it says, Dr. Samaro stated that by granting this variance, 5 parking spaces would be available for use in the municipal parking lot by individuals not associated with his business. And I wasn't quite sure what that meant exactly. I'm trying to recall.
I think he was referring to, I guess, customers outside of his business or his practice. So just, I guess, regular.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we added the qualification that Jay has put in, maybe that you can work those in together.
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry, on page 3, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's a 6th paragraph down. It begins with, the board asked if there would be green improvements. The board also addressed the administrative comments made by the construction official who had concerns with code compliance. BMS agrees with all comments except regarding the construction code. They agreed to change only what the project will be. They agreed to change only what the project will be impacting in reference to the construction code. Is that making sense? I'm having a little trouble. BMS agrees to all comments except regarding the construction code. I would think that we'd want them to agree to the construction code. That's why I'm just a little confused. So maybe we should.
Maybe regarding construction code outside the scope of project, beyond the scope of the project.
Maybe it might be worthwhile listening to that tape again just to see what that means exactly.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if it
Yes.
helps, Condition 6 in the draft resolution
Yep.
that we'll be coming up to in a moment
Yes.
might give Stephanie what she needs to
Okay.
modify that
Okay.
Sentence
Thanks, Mr.
accurately.
Warner. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Okay. It was a very long hearing, a lot of details, Stephanie, so It's hard to get everything perfectly correct. And as Bridget knows, everybody speaks clearly and distinctly and don't talk over each other, so it's very easy. So thank you for doing that. I don't have any more questions with regard to the May 22nd minutes. Anyone else? Any thoughts, ideas? So can I have a motion to approve subject to the changes we discussed?
So moved.
And a second? Second. All right, thank you. Okay, good. So now we have the very detailed meeting minutes of June 26th. We have air conditioning, we have lights, so this is a good thing. We're sorry that you all had to do a drive run, but thank you for coming here last time, and we're happy everybody's here now under good conditions. So this was very straightforward. I don't have any comments to this. Anybody have any comments to the June 22nd meeting minutes?
I move they be adopted.
All right. I have a second to that.
Second.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. Okay, so, all right.
Mr. Chairman, voice vote, we can do it for both?
Sure, yeah,
Yes.
let me do that.
Okay, so we're going to conduct a voice vote with only the eligible voting members who were present that evening. We're talking about June 26th. So present were Vice Chairman Zucker, Mr. Brinkerhoff, Mr. Delory, Councilmember Miniger, and Mr. Stern. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Great.
Now back to, sorry,
Next.
now back to May 22nd. The eligible voting members will be those present, which was Chairman Anderson, Mr. Brinkerhoff, Ms. McNeil, Mr. Delory, Councilmember Miniger, Vice Chairman Zucker, Mr. Formicelli, Mr. Bell, and Mr. Hillebrand. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just ask if the board members and yourself, when you're talking, just speak into your mics. It's really hard to hear sometimes if
Okay.
you're not.
Thanks.
Okay?
And if my voice tends to drop off or anybody else is here and we're not hearing clearly, please go ahead and speak up, because it's our intent that you do hear us. Okay, so I guess we're here for the public hearing tonight. The Summit East Corporate Property LLC on 86 Morris Avenue. That's a proposal tonight for GDP amendment and preliminary and final site plan approval. And Mr. Warner, I'd be sure that we have everything in order.
It is, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, the board will recall that at that very brief meeting we had a month ago in the Rotunda, we did announce that the notice was timely and its content sufficient, timely served and published, and we did carry this matter without further notice to this evening. Also, I believe applicant's counsel will probably explain the intended procedure for this evening. I'm happy to weigh in as well when he's done to let you know if I concur or not.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Okay. All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jason Tubell, attorney for the applicant, Summit East Property Group. This is an application for 86 Morris Avenue, Block 4101, lots 1, 28, 32, and 33, and also Block 4102, Lot 3. It's located in the PROD 2 zone. So this is an application for several things, and I'll go through them in order. So the first is a GDP amendment, which is a general development plan amendment. There was an original general development plan by Celgene many, many years ago. It has been amended several times, and the reason we're amending it is that we are removing some structures on the property, erecting others that are connecting to existing buildings, somewhat changing the site plan. So that's the purpose of the GDP amendment. And everything that the applicant submitted was consistent with the ordinance that the city adopted pursuant to the MLUL, which instructs GDP ordinances. Then we have, which is a typical application before the planning board, preliminary and final major site plan approval with bulk variance relief. So we think, number one, the project is consistent with the prior objectives and the original objectives of the GDP that was first formulated for this property. And the goal is to reinvigorate this site, also reinvigorate the site with improvements, not only the building, but also green space, stormwater infrastructure, and aesthetically pleasing views. And to have a state-of-the-art research and development building for Kenview, which is a part of Johnson & Johnson, that focuses in 3 primary areas that you'll hear a lot about, of consumer health, which are self-care, health and beauty, and essential health. The goal is to redefine the corporate campus that we have here by removing approximately 263,901 square feet of older buildings, repurposing 199,482 square feet of existing buildings, and adding new facilities of approximately 98,000 square feet. And we'll go into this in detail. We do have some bulk variances associated with the application. I don't think any of them are substantial, but nonetheless, I'll state what they are. Steep slope, rooftop penthouse height, overall building height, rooftop coverage, and then we need a variance for lighting in one particular area of the property. And we'll go over that when we through our testimony. But we see the benefits of this project as being aesthetics with respect to the new building, which has a target of LEED Platinum, which will obviously be great for the environment. Substantial addition of green space by decreasing impervious area and increasing the pervious coverage on the site, which will facilitate both landscaping and stormwater management. And I think that the applicant did this in a way that was respectful to the surrounding residential properties that are in the area. So, Mr. Chairman, this is the order of witnesses that I plan on calling. We have our civil engineer, Lenny Savino with Langen Engineering. Then we have Michael Zura, who's our landscape architect. Michael will deal with landscaping and lighting as part of the application. Then I'll call our architect. I'm going to swear in two architects, and I went over this with counsel, with Mr. Warner, Taejun Young, and Richard Ashworth. Mr. Ashworth signed and sealed the plans as the New Jersey licensed architect for Jacobs. However, Mr. Young is the project manager of the site, and he will do the bulk of the testimony with respect to the project. Then Angela Blair from Kenview will be the representative that will be speaking about what Kenview is, giving you an overview of what will be done in terms operationally at the campus. And then finally, Greg Woodruff from Langen Engineering is our professional planner that will go through the GDP amendment and then the bulk variances that are associated with the site plan. So that's sort of the batting order, so to speak, of how we plan the presentation. We submitted a slide presentation to Stephanie that consists of 49 sheets, and we'll go through that during the course of the presentation. So unless you have any other questions for me, I'd respectfully request your permission to call our first witness.
Mr. Warner?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Yeah, again, to be clear, what the board is being asked to do this evening is twofold. One, to amend the existing GDP, and two, to grant the preliminary and final site plan and bulk variance relief. I believe it is appropriate, if not practical and efficient as well, to hear the application in a consolidated fashion, as I understand is being presented by applicant's counsel, and then we can have two votes, if you will, when all is complete. First, amending the GDP, and then, assuming it's amended, the preliminary and final site plan and bulk variance relief, whether it's granted or not. We do not have to bifurcate them into two. I think that would be, frankly, impractical and inefficient, in my opinion. That's not a legal opinion, I guess, but...
No, but that's good advice.
Legal and practical are not necessarily mutually exclusive. If I may, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize, my understanding was I thought we had something on the agenda, an extension request by an applicant, Vassar Real Estate.
Are they here tonight?
For time to file those subdivision deeds. And again, my apology, they do have counsel here, and I recognize, speaking of being practical, that may be a lot shorter than this evening's presentation by this applicant, and I apologize, but I throw that out.
No, that's a good point. I didn't realize that the applicant was here, and Mr. Tuvell, would you mind us?
No, that's perfectly fine.
taking care of this?
And I believe their counsels, Ms. Dougherty, to the extent counsel's necessary, these extensions are pretty routine. This was a subdivision that was, as always, a minor subdivision has to be recorded within 190 days. They were unable to do so, provided a letter explaining why, and we did draft for the board a resolution extending the time to file the subdivision deed and the associated driveway access easement until October 5th, if the board so sees fit, but maybe Ms. Dougherty can briefly explain why.
So we received a letter, I know you're going to repeat this, but we received a letter requesting the extension, and then we received the draft resolution. All the board members, when I say we, have gotten this by email from Stephanie, so we've all read it, so I don't think there's a lot of time that needs to be spent on it, but please go ahead and run through the situation for us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Attorney Rosemary Stone Dougherty with the law firm of Deverbaum and Borgap, here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Vassar Real Estate. As indicated in our request for an extension, just to be very succinct, we really just had an issue of, I guess, as I indicated with board counsel, of a perfect storm. We submitted the subdivision deeds for review back in November of last year. We followed up in January. There were some revisions that need to be made to the deed. They were submitted. But in the interim, the original attorney who worked on the project left the firm. The attorney assigned after that attorney left the firm. And in the meantime, your planning board secretary took a different position. You have a new planning board secretary, and your board engineer who originally reviewed the deeds retired. So with all of that happening, we resubmitted everything fresh. I understand council now has had a copy of the deeds to be able to review them. I spoke to Ms. Anderson earlier today, and she's re-reviewing them, and she's sending them over to Colliers to make sure the legal descriptions are now accurate with the last revisions. So therefore, we're asking the board for this extension.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, October 5th will be sufficient time, in your opinion, to have the deeds recorded?
Yes.
Any of the members of the board have questions on this issue? And we'll have a chance to look at the documents. So at this point, I guess I will entertain a motion to, I guess, approve the extension. And we go from here, Mr. Warner, to a formal resolution at this point?
Right, all in one fell swoop, if you will, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. The board can move and second and roll call vote to adopt the resolution extending time to file the subdivision deeds and easements as submitted to the board.
All right, great. So may I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second?
And we need a voice vote or on that?
Roll call, if you don't mind, it's
Roll call? Okay.
resolution.
All right,
Thank
right.
Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff, Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Councilmember Miniger,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
and Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Stone.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you again. Mr. Duval, thank you very much for that interruption. We appreciate that.
No, that's fine.
One thing I wanted to mention, Mr. Warner, is I would still, if there are members of the public here, I would like to have the members of the public be able to ask questions of each of the witnesses that you present, rather than trying to roll them up to the end. It's too much to digest. So I think with that exception, I'm ready to go forward. Call your
And
first
with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll swear in all the witnesses
Oh,
as well
good.
as our board professionals.
Okay, great.
All right, so I'll have all the witnesses sworn, whether they're testifying or not, just in case, right now?
Yeah, that would be
Okay,
Mr.
fine.
Warner's suggestion.
That would be prudent.
Okay.
So if all potential witnesses can raise their right hand, do all of you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you all. That way we can't miss anybody or forget anybody. Thank you.
Yep, all
All
right.
right, all right, Mr. Chairman, the first witness I'd like to call is Leonard Savino with Langen Engineering, who's our civil engineer. He's right here. So, Lenny, if you could just give the board the benefit of your qualifications, educational background, licenses held, and experience in testifying as a civil engineer in the state of New Jersey.
Certainly. Good evening. My name is Leonard Savino. I'm a principal with Langen Engineering and Environmental Services. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering and a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My license is current. I have been qualified in many municipalities in New Jersey to testify as an expert. And also, I have testified before this board several years back. And also, the drawings that you have before you were prepared under my direct supervision.
All right, I'd ask if the board would accept Mr. Savino's qualifications.
Any board members have any questions with regard to Mr. Savino's? All right, please, go ahead.
Great. So, Mr. Chairman, we have this presentation that consists of 49 sheets, and I spoke to Mr. Warner about it. We're just going to mark it A1, if that's okay, consisting of 49 sheets. That way we don't have to go through each page. Okay.
Would be preferable.
All right.
Thank you.
So, Lenny, if you could just start by orienting the board to where the site is located and some of the existing conditions on the property.
Certainly. So as you see, this is an aerial photo. Morris Avenue is on the top of the sheet, upper left there. The drive-in to the guardhouse is right here where I'm circling. The features on the site consist of Building L, which is the large white square to your right that I'm circling here. The buildings also have white roofs in general, are called the alphabet buildings, A through H. And the J building is on the other side of this railway easement.
And Lenny, if you could just refer to the title of that sheet that you're referring to, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's aerial exhibit, exhibit 1.
Thank you.
Yep. So the site is block 4101, lot 1, 28, and 32, and block 4102, lot 3. The improvements are proposed only on lot 28, which is the majority of this larger lot, although our disturbance area is really concentrated into this area right here. So these buildings, as council had mentioned, are to be cleaned and cleared or demolished to allow for construction of the improvement of a new structure here that will connect to the Building L, which I'll show you on a subsequent sheet. These buildings will allow for the construction of an open green area called the Great Lawn. The alphabet buildings that will be demolished total approximately 263,901 square feet. 263,901 square feet. And Building L, this building to remain, is 199,482 square feet. I did mention that Building J is also to remain, this other large structure, but we are not here for any improvements, and nothing is proposed on that side of the rail. The site is subject to a GDP, as council had mentioned. It's important to note that there are ample parking spaces on the site. There's a total actually of 1,703 parking spaces located in this parking, at-grade parking lot here. There's 2 actually. Inside Building L with the garage itself. Some parking over here associated with the alphabet buildings, and also the ones on the opposite side, as I mentioned, that we are not impacting. Inside Building L, as part of L's construction, 948 of those 1,700 spaces exist. And of those 948, 8 of them are electric vehicle parking spaces. It's important, I think, to note how far the buildings are from just about everything neighbor-wise. If you look, quite a large open green area between Morris and Shunpike. There are several residents over here to the north. Over here is this very large green area, wooded area, and then Route 78. And then the other nearest neighbors would be down here. So this is approximately, just to give you an orientation, it's about 1,000, more than 1,000 feet to Morris Avenue. So these buildings are tucked in pretty well into the site. So the impacts to the neighbors should be minimal and will be minimal, we expect. Another important thing about the site is the grades on the site. So I'm just going to, again, focus on the area right here for now, and then we're going to move into another plan that will give you a blow-up of that area. But just to understand the grades on the site, they're average in this area around elevation 300, with the exception of this area to the right to the east, where right around here it drops down significantly. The front of Building L is about elevation 295. The back is 265.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to slow down. The front of Building L is
The front of Building L is elevation 295, and the rear is 265. So there's about a 30-foot grade change. Coming around Building L.
I'm sorry, if I may, Mr. Chairman, in addition to speaking a little slower for both of us, if you can also speak directionally, because 3 or 4 times I heard around here, around there, and at least in the transcripts, we're not going to be able to know what that means. So if
Okay.
you could speak directionally when you're referring to certain areas, that might be helpful in the future.
Understood. I will do my best to slow down as well. So the other notable grade change on the site is behind, I should say to the south of Building L, where I'm pointing now, where the grade also drops off about 25 feet. So from about 298 in the front of the building down to about 270 or so. So those are important features on the site that we've had to design around and account for.
And all those dimensions are Building L, correct?
Building L and also behind the other portion of the Alphabet buildings that we're going to be demolishing to accommodate the space for the new building.
Just for the transcript, so we know what elevations are referring to which building.
Yes. So let's go to the next plan. So this is a site plan rendering, a color rendering of our site plan. I think this gives a good perspective, now blown up. So as I had mentioned, the drive coming down, upper left corner of the sheet. There's an existing guardhouse over here as part of the improvements that will be removed. Let me just continue here. So what we are proposing are two other guard houses. One is to the north of Building L. You can see that little colored area there.
And what's in white, Lenny, is the existing building, correct?
That's correct. So what is in white is Building L that you saw before on the previous exhibit, also with a large white square roof.
And to the south of that in gray is the proposed addition to that building,
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay.
The other guardhouse will be located to the south. So access into the site will come down through this driveway on the west side of the site, go along the south through a guardhouse just to get access. Generally, really, this is for truck access to a loading dock. The rest of the traffic will go through the middle of the site, sheet north here, in between the two parking lots, or over here, so they have an option. They can come up to the circle in front of Building L and go north further into the guardhouse, or they can come just right across from where the former guardhouse was and make their way over. This will control access. These are both gated accesses, and this will be controlled for all those that are employees entering the facility. So vehicular circulation through the site is two-way throughout all the interior roadways in the campus. Signage has been provided, and one important feature that we designed and maintained was a loop road all the way around Building L, which continues around the new extension to Building L, the addition, and then can continue out. So emergency vehicles have free circulation around both buildings, which they currently have, and that was an important feature that we're maintaining. And we have coordinated with representatives of the fire department, and we did submit an emergency vehicle circulation plan as part of the application. So back to the proposed addition. This proposed building will connect. This little part here is the connector to Building L. We have matched finished floors, so the finished floor is at elevation 295 here and 295 here. There are no doors or entrances here. All entrance and access to the new building will be through the existing building. So the proposed building is 98,000 square feet. In 2 stories, the footprint is 41,194 square feet. And it does have a lower level, which you're going to see later with the architectural plans. So I'd like to talk for a minute about parking. As I had mentioned, there's a significant number of parking spaces on the site, and with the removal of what we're calling the Alphabet buildings, which are located where the Great Lawn is and also where the new addition is going to be located, the reduction in parking, well, I should say the required number of parking for this many square feet of building to remain, which is L and the addition, is 673 spaces. And that's calculated based on 1 space per 133 square feet of office and 1 per 1,000 square feet for the research and development. As I had mentioned on the previous plan, existing in Building L are 948 spaces. So we have more than enough ample parking inside Building L. There are some spaces here that will be maintained just for visitors and such. So for the whole campus, 966 spaces are required after the demolition of the Alphabet buildings. One thing that's worth noting also is there are 8 electrical vehicle spaces inside the building. We're going to be adding 19 new ones to meet the requirement of 4% of the total that are required. So 27 electrical vehicle charging spaces inside. The features of the Great Lawn, we call it, will be described by my colleague, Michael Zora, our landscape architect. So with respect to the building itself, it complies with all the setbacks. We do not have any issues. As I mentioned, the building, as you see, is tucked well into the campus. With respect to lot coverage, the maximum allowable is 60%. We are well below that at 35.9%. The maximum allowable for building coverage is 25%. We are well below that at 8.9%. So this location, why here? Well, it makes sense considering this beautiful new building that's not that old and the capacity within it to be able to put something in proximity that makes sense and connect it. So the location is tucked well back into the campus, and the connection makes a lot of sense, and allowing this large open area as well as part of this new development. With respect to utilities on the site, we will be connecting to the existing utilities. Pretty straightforward. As you would expect, there will be a reduction due to the demolition of the Alphabet buildings. One other thing that's worth noting is because of the grade change, we do have to have just a force main that'll lift sanitary up and connect up here in the center of the site to the existing for gravity flow. So that's everything else with respect to utilities is very straightforward. So this next exhibit is actually the existing pervious coverage plan. So the white essentially is that which is impervious, so that would be roofs, sidewalks, pavement. So all the green area that is shown is the existing green within the development area. So again, I'm focusing in on this development area here, not the entire site. So to give you an idea of what those areas represent, so the impervious coverage, the existing pervious coverage in green is 2.02 acres. If you can go to the next exhibit, you'll see the significant increase in green on the site. So we are adding...
But Lenny, before you do that, that's
Sure.
the proposed.
This is the proposed configuration, and those in green are representing the proposed pervious areas, green areas. So we are increasing from 2.02 acres to 3.54 acres, essentially about 70,000 square feet of new green pervious on the site. It's going to be very attractive. The other important element that I'd like to touch on is in the next exhibit, which is the steep slopes plan. So steep slopes are defined in the ordinance as any slope greater than 15%. And the intent is not for reduction of development or anything like that. It is really just to protect from erosion on the site. So in the existing conditions, we have represented here, you can see these dark areas that are kind of spotty. As I had mentioned, the grade change is pretty significant from the front of building L area down to the back area. So that would make sense. These are predominantly where the steep slopes are. There is a total of about a half an acre, it's 0.56 acres of existing steep slopes that are going to be disturbed as part of this improvement. In the proposed condition, you can see on the right-hand side, it's a little harder to see, but these hatched areas right around the proposed building are the only places, with the exception of right over here in the amphitheater, that we are proposing steep slopes, and that is just to accommodate, as I mentioned, the steep grade across the site.
So on the erosion issue, do you see any negative impacts to the site in terms of the intent of the ordinance from an engineering
No, I do
perspective?
not. They will all be stabilized with vegetation, and that is the intent, to protect from any erosion going to any of the neighboring site, any of the neighbors' sites, and or any waterways. But that just to understand the difference between what is existing and what's proposed, it's about a 50% reduction in steep slopes.
So even though we're asking for the variance, it's actually an improvement to the existing condition from a steep slope perspective.
Correct. Grading and drainage on the site is another important thing to note. With grades like this, you'd expect lots of walls on the site. Well, the building really picks up a significant amount of the grade change, so that helps a lot. And the ordinance requires that there are no combinations of wall and fence that are higher than 10 feet combined, as you're probably aware. So we've designed accordingly. But we do have some walls on the site, but none of them exceed 10 feet with a fence on top of them. So the other grades, I had mentioned that in the Alphabet Building area, which is right here, we'll just stay on this sheet for now, that the grades were about elevation 300, and in the proposed condition, we're generally staying around 300 as well. There are some minor grading changes right in front of the proposed building, just to keep this at about elevation 295. And then we have to grade down around to bring trucks down into this lower area. And that ends up being at about elevation 270.
And that's along the south and west portion of the new addition?
East.
Sorry, east.
Yeah, southeast
Southeast.
side, yeah. So
Yep.
the entire east side of the site is generally lower than the west. Let's see. So another important element to discuss would be the stormwater management. So New Jersey requires that 3 elements are evaluated and designed for. One is stormwater quality, the other is quantity, and the other is recharge. So we have designed the site in compliance with New Jersey stormwater regulations. So essentially, no quantity reductions are required, so no detention is required, because we have added so much pervious area that the DEP allows us to design with 1 hydrograph in the proposed condition to be lower in flows than the existing condition. And we're able to do that because we're adding so much pervious area for all storms, all the design storms, which are the 210 and 100-year storms. With respect to water quality, there are no water quality measures required, although a significant amount of pervious area is a great green feature for water quality. But we are decreasing the vehicular impervious area, which is the trigger for water quality. We're decreasing it by a little over 1 acre. So by removing the parking and some of the paved areas, we're creating that better condition. We are proposing some small filter strips, and Michael actually will get into this a little bit, as part of the landscape design, and some rain gardens. So Michael, our landscape architect, will describe them. The third element was the groundwater recharge, and groundwater recharge measures are not required because the site is located in a planning area 1 zone. So we are in compliance for all stormwater measures. The last item here would be related to utilities. I had mentioned that proposed site would be serviced, so really no new utilities in any of the fronting right-of-ways. So all utilities would just be serviced from within the site, which is pretty attractive and certainly less disturbing to the neighborhood. The last plan that I'd like to discuss has to do with the building height, which is a little bit complicated. So we do have a plan that we provided, and this is called the building height plan. It's sheet CS010. So essentially, there's 2 definitions. And within those 2 definitions, the first definition has 2 parts. So I'm going to explain those. So for definition 1, the height of the building is from the existing and the proposed grade planes, respectively, to the highest point of the roof. So the highest point of the roof, and this plan here gives you an idea of just a section of the roof. So this is the highest part of the roof, not the parapet, but the roof. That is elevation 326.71. This plan on the left shows a detailed calculation for the existing grade plane. So the elevation of the existing grade plane is 280.86. The requirement is that the maximum allowable height for this first definition is no higher than 60 feet. The difference between the proposed roof at 326.71 and the existing grade plane of 280.86 is only 45.8 feet, so well below the 60-foot maximum. The second part of definition 1 is similar, with the exception of going from the proposed roof to the proposed grade plane instead of the existing. So it's calculated on the right-hand side. This is provided in the set, as I mentioned. Similarly, with an average elevation of 279.87, so just a little bit lower, which makes the building height a little higher. And the building height then is 46.84, which is still well below 60 feet. For definition 2, for which we are actually asking for a height variance, the definition is from the lowest perimeter elevation to the roof or parapet. So the parapet is a little bit higher, it's 3 foot higher. The tricky part about this definition is, and what is really triggering the need for us to ask for variance, is that the existing building L, all the way on the east side of the right, is at elevation 265. Significant. It's kind of like going into a basement around the back of a house. It's very low. right? And because of that low elevation of 265, when compared to the height of the maximum height, which is the parapet, the maximum allowable is 65 feet. So the lowest perimeter spot is actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to correct myself, it's 263.47. And the top of the proposed parapet is elevation 331.92. The difference between those two is 68.45 feet, which exceeds the 65 max, but less than 5%. And it's really entirely driven by the existing condition of the low grade on the east side of the site, which we cannot control.
So Lenny, because we're considering this one building, because it's an addition, we're asking for the variance because of the, we're only asking for the variance because of the existing condition in the northeast corner of the building.
That's correct.
Okay.
Didn't we provide a variance for that in previous approval? My
Yeah, I was,
recollections back in 2016, 17, something like that, we approved
yeah, so
high
I had,
variance,
I had Oprah the prior approvals, and I don't believe I got that one.
Okay.
And I was looking at Krista's review that she provided, and I'm looking here to see if that variance was granted. I see she refers to a resolution in 2014 and 2019, but not, I don't think what you're
It may,
referring to.
I may be mistaken, but I
Yeah.
thought we provided a
And
variance
we
to the
took the-
top of the stair tower.
Sorry.
I thought we provided a variance to the top of the stair tower, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, and we took the conservative approach here because we're considering it one building, but it is an existing condition there.
That concludes my testimony.
All right, that concludes direct for Mr. Savino. Happy to answer any questions from the board or the public.
Board members have any questions of Mr. Savino?
As a footage number, what does that 5% equate to in that overage?
3.5 feet.
Okay.
It's 65, and we're at 68.5 in that one area. No, good question.
Can you just go over the number of parking spaces?
Certainly.
I think, I just, you were throwing out a lot of numbers quickly.
Give me 1 second.
I think you said there were 948 existing
Yes.
underneath,
Correct.
and you're adding,
We're not adding any
you're
parking.
not adding any,
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
But you're keeping, I think you said about 30 from the other existing that are at grade?
No, can you go back to the exhibit, please? Go to the aerial photo. Oh, right there, that's
Yes.
fine. Yeah, so inside Building L is the 948 that will not be impacted. No increase there.
Okay,
There's no increase really anywhere. There's a reduction of about 60 in this area next to the left side, the west side of the Alphabet Building, so they're going.
okay,
There's going to be some that'll remain over here, which would likely serve Building J at some future time, but are not necessary for the development here. And these spaces that are out in the front area of Building L, to the north of the proposed green, they will be remaining, but we're not touching them at all.
they're
So
just remaining?
they're
Okay.
remaining. Yep, all parking will remain outside.
When you said, also, this was another question, you have 8 electric vehicle charging spaces
Inside the building, correct?
inside that are part of the 948,
Correct,
and you're adding 19.
correct.
So, and those 19 will be part of the 948?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So the number won't change.
That's what I was a little
Yes,
unclear of, so thank you for clarification.
you're welcome.
And what was the required number of spaces?
Give me 1 second. 673. So
673,
well below
okay.
what's really needed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any of board members' questions? Yes, Rick?
Just following up on the parking question. With the reduction in building area and the reduction in headcount, it seems to me that you have more parking places than are needed for both code and logical numbers of people. The narrative also describes the proximity of the train station and implies, if not states, that perhaps people would be utilizing a shuttle that used to exist. The narrative refers to a shuttle that used to exist, doesn't say that one would be there. From an environmental perspective, could more of the parking have been turned into green space? First question. Is there going to be a shuttle to further reduce the likely number of parked cars? And leading question, with the movement to more and more electric vehicles, third question, how transformable are the spaces that are not for electric vehicles to electric vehicles when in some point in the future, many more people might be using them? So I could repeat the three questions: shuttle, electric,
Yes.
and green space where you have park space.
So when you start with the last question, I would say, is there electrical conduit that allows you to convert more spaces in the future to EV?
Yeah, there will be the availability of more to be converted if necessary. We are not proposing any more than is required at this time. but,
Understood.
Yeah.
Can I piggyback as a sub-part of that question? If that were to happen in the future, how impacted would the number of spaces be by the conversion to electric? I mean, do the number of spaces go down, or does it stay the same, generally speaking?
It really depends on what type of charging facility is selected, because there's a variety of them. Some of them take up a space next to a space, some of them are in front of the space, so it would really be part of a further evaluation of a design of which ones would fit. I know technology is getting better too, so they're starting to get a little bit smaller, but so that could lend to that number. But
The shuttle, I recognize, isn't a civil engineering question, it's an operational question, but it gets to the idea that more of the asphalt could have been greened than seems to be in the offing. Perhaps there's some notion of future expansion, greater headcount when COVID is a distant memory, let's hope. But I'd like to pick up on a fourth question, if I might, that's related to that.
Sure.
Coming out of the Environmental Commission's review with the tagline, would you consider the use of permeable paving for the parking areas? Very commendable increase in the numbers, and the diagrams show great effort to create more permeable surface. Thank you. It's great. Could have been more.
well, I think that's a significant increase in green area. If you were to have to convert existing asphalt into permeable pavement, you'd be excavating a significant amount of material. You'd be taking out probably about 2 to 3 feet of material into the entire parking lot and disposing of it somewhere. It's a lot of truck traffic, it's a lot of excavation. And because we've created so much new green space and reduced the impervious roadway areas, we're not even subject
Yeah.
to...
It's a reasonable answer, and I would say the same thing in your shoes, but it's a little bit, can't think of the polite word, disingenuous. With all the demolition that you're doing, where is that material going?
Oh, well, actually, we're likely, well, we're not sure if we are a net zero here, but there are some pretty notable voids in the existing building basement areas that are going to need to be filled to get back up to elevation 300,
So it'll remain on site?
Yeah, essentially,
Excellent.
yeah.
I didn't
Yes.
hear that in any of the narrative or see it in any of the narrative.
More of a construction
Thank you.
discussion, I guess.
Any other questions from the board? Yes.
I had a question about the parking in addition. If I'm understanding correctly, so the site is effectively going to be over-parked, I think, in terms of amount of parking. Is that implying at all future development that we haven't contemplated, or a large amount of visiting or event-type parking? Well, I think it's all sort of interrelated, but it'd be interesting to hear, that's a very generous amount of parking. What's the motivation for that, which is not typical, I think, for this type of facility?
Yeah, we didn't really get into a discussion about why. I think it really would likely have to do with just disturbing more of the site for no reason at this point. I mean, we are disturbing a good amount of the site to create new green in a big lawn area, so it's a pretty significant improvement.
Yes, other questions? Yeah. John?
Well, I don't know. I thought I'd pick up on the shuttle question. Was that answered?
I'm not really sure about the operation of whether a shuttle will be used or not. It's being contemplated, I understand, from council.
Yeah, and speaking with the applicant, they are looking at doing shuttle service with Kenview.
Oh, great.
Good. That's good. Any other questions? To our board professionals, have any questions of this witness?
No, just to follow up on the parking issue, there's about 650 excess parking spaces over and above code. So that begs the question.
Dipti, any questions for this
I
witness?
have some questions, although most were answered during the testimony. There was the proposed curbing extending into the Rahway Valley Railroad property. Has that been handled with discussion with the neighboring property?
Yeah, there actually is no proposed curbing
Okay.
going into the right-of-way. On one of the sheets, which was an early demolition plan, we were going to remove the asphalt that was there and whatever curbing. But at this point, we're just going to build up to the edge, and we're not going to go into the right-of-way.
Okay.
And actually, all other comments in the Collier's letter, if you haven't addressed them in testimony, the applicant will comply with those?
That's correct, we will
Okay.
comply.
Okay.
That's good to know. Mr. Warner will note that. Any members of the audience, of the public, any questions of this witness? Oh, sure. At this point in time, we'll make questions available to members of the public for each witness, and then at that point, the questions are directed at the witness and the testimony particularly that the witness is given. There's a comment section at the end of the presentation that members of the public can come forward and express any opinions or thoughts that they might have. So, any takers on this one? All right, I think, Mr. Duval, I can go to your next witness.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next witness I'd like to call is our landscape architect, Michael Zura. So Michael, like Mr. Savino, if you could just put your qualifications on the record for the board.
Sure.
Educational background, licenses held, and experience testifying in the state of New Jersey.
Sure, thank you very much. So yes, I'm Michael Zura. I'm a principal with Langen Engineering, and I've got an MS degree in business and a minor in botany from Rutgers University here in New Jersey. I've got my master's in landscape architecture from the University of Pennsylvania. I am a licensed landscape architect in 27 states. I'm also a LEED accredited professional. I have testified numerous times in the state of New Jersey, although I've never had the pleasure of testifying before this board.
All right. Will the board accept Mr. Zura?
Any questions from the members of the board?
All right.
Sounds good, thank you.
So Michael, just indicate to the board what exhibit or what page you're starting with in your presentation.
You bet, you bet. So up on the screen, we have the site plan rendering, which you saw earlier. Mr. Savino testified to that. And just to kind of overview the landscape here, this is a very green site as it's being conceived with the improvements that are planned. The vocabulary that we have incorporated into the landscape design really relates to a lot of very common New Jersey landscape typologies. We make some comparisons to popular landscape idioms in agriculture. You'll see alleys, rows of trees. You'll see references to croplands, of course, open landscaped areas, some references to the Highlands part of New Jersey with the sort of Highlands berm. And I'll get into a little more detail as we go through the imagery. So I think Mr. Savino did a great job of describing the overall circulation. I'll speak to a couple of the elements in the landscape, and then we'll dive into some nice visuals that I think will help folks really understand what the site will look like when it's complete. So looking at site plan rendering as it's up on the screen, the largest feature, this egg-shaped lawn, is what we were referring to as the Great Lawn. You can see it's got a stripe down the middle of that lawn. Those are elm trees, which were very, very common in New Jersey years ago. These are improved varieties of elms, so they're resistant to Dutch elm disease, which is what did them in initially. This pink-purple area is, again, another agricultural reference in front of Building L. That is what we're calling an orchard. It's a cherry orchard. The top sort of area of the Great Lawn, which would be to the northwest, is what we refer to as the Highlands berm. That's where we're referring to Highlands landscape areas in New Jersey. It's got a nice amphitheater there, which you'll see in a few moments. page south to the southeast, you'll see a half-court athletic court and bocce facilities there. As Mr. Savino mentioned, we are proposing some small rain gardens. I'll point them out to you on the screen. One is near to the entrance of Building L, just before you get to the drop-off circle in this triangular-shaped wedge. Some rain gardens adjacent to the building extension, cascading down the slope to the southwest of the extension. And as Mr. Savino also mentioned, we've included a filter strip, which is designed to capture any surface runoff coming off of the lawn before it reaches the drive. Also to note, we are preserving 4 significantly sized existing trees. I'll point them out to you, kind of running in a clockwise motion, starting here at about 7 o'clock in the lower left corner of the Great Lawn area, which would be the southwest. There's a maple tree here that's large and existing to remain. We have a very large yellowwood, which would be at about the 10 o'clock position on the page, almost at the top of the Great Lawn, and 2 large honey locusts along the main drive that lead to the circle and drop-off. Those are envisioned to remain as part of the plan. So that gives you, I hope, a sort of an overall, DJ, if you wouldn't mind sliding to the next slide. So what we're looking at here in this image, we've titled it View Across Great Lawn Looking Southeast. So you can see Building L in the far background on the left with the white roof, and the proposed building extension to the right of that. I think you can see the features that I just described to you. Again, just to recap, you can see we've kind of ghosted the existing trees to remain, the 2 honey locusts along the drive, just so you could see what's going on underneath them, the yellowwood here in the foreground, and the maple tree to the right of the sports courts on the right side of the page. You can see the Great Lawn plainly here, and the elm tree alley bifurcating that lawn panel. Next slide. Here's another view looking, so the name of this drawing is View Across Great Lawn Looking Southwest. This is an aerial view. You can see in the foreground the roof and entrance for Building L and the proposed building extension to the left of that. You can clearly see the entrance plaza, which we'll show some other views of in a moment, the cherry orchard as well, and the various other landscape features that will be part of the Great Lawn. Next. So now we're getting into some eye-level views, and the image we have on the screen, the drawing is called the main approach down the promenade. We're calling the connecting drive down to the existing Building L, the promenade, and you can see the existing Building L in the distance. The proposed addition, the Building L, is slightly hidden in this view by the existing landscape just to the right. But you can see the character of the landscape. We're envisioning a very lush landscape, really anchored by the 2 large existing honey locust trees, this one in the distance here and this one in the foreground. They're sizable trees, and we're planning to underplant beneath them to really create a space that's interesting, colorful, welcoming. It's a place that we could see having seating as depicted in the view, with folks taking a walk at lunchtime, having a cup of coffee, taking a private call, and sitting out in that garden area. Next slide, please. So this next view that's up on the screen is called Arrival Court and Gateway Sculpture. Here you have progressed down the promenade, and immediately in front of you is the existing Building L. Kenview is proposing to erect a Kenview logo-like sculpture here in the existing circular drop-off. This view, you can see to the right the cherry orchard with the pink flowers, and you start to pick up on one of the other features. At the back of the plaza space, we are proposing to install these outdoor workstations, which will allow folks to, on a nice day, be able to do some work outside, small meetings, personal thinking time on your laptop to write that paper or that email for work. Next view. The next view we have is called View of Outdoor Work Pods and Great Lawn. I already tipped my cards about the work pods. You can see them a little more clearly here on the left side of this drawing. You can see they're showing up as these dark color structures, kind of under that, again, New Jersey vocabulary of orchards is being brought in here. You can see the Great Lawn in the distance beyond, and we're providing this generous paved plaza in the foreground as part of a welcoming experience coming to the Kenview campus, but this also might be an area where Kenview hosts some employee events and things like that out on this plaza space. Thanks. So the next image up on the screen is titled Amphitheater. This is a view at the western end of the Great Lawn. You remembered me mentioning earlier on about the New Jersey Highlands typology occurring in Sussex County and northern parts of the state, very mountainous part of New Jersey. That is what we're saying is the berm that embraces the Great Lawn, but it also forms the bones for the development of an amphitheater, which Kenview, again, might use for employee events and things like that. In this view here, you can see the Great Lawn to the left, the large open lawn panel, and to the right side of the path, you can see the promenade garden that was illustrated in the first couple of views that I shared with you. Next. This view is titled Forecourt Garden, and in the background, to the left side of the screen, you'll see the existing building, L, and to the right, the building extension. Also to the left, you're just catching in this view the last tree in the elm alley that marches across the Great Lawn. You can see the generous walking path in the center, and the forecourt garden is what we're envisioning being developed in front of the building extension, primarily a paved area with some bubbler fountain water features, planting beds and things of that nature right at the building edge. Next slide. This view, if you were walking through that last picture closer to the buildings and look to your left, this is the view down the Elm Alley. This drawing is titled Looking Down the Alley, simply put. We really see this as a nice shady respite, especially for a summer day like we've been having lately, where you can sit. There'll be benches and seating there, get a bit of a cool break while still being able to see across the expanses of the lawn. So it's very open and very visible. And I think that'll be a nice space. Next slide. So, shifting gears to just a few technical points on the planting plan. I will try to speak slowly and directly when it comes to numbers, but I think my numbers here are simpler than some other numbers we've heard tonight. So, the technical landscape plan illustrates 59 proposed shade trees, consisting of maples, elms, nisses, and oaks, different species that are appropriate to New Jersey. We've got 63 proposed ornamental trees, again, using a lot of native species and species indigenous to New Jersey, plants like redbud, silverbell, the cherries and snowball species are included. We're proposing 58 evergreen trees to be installed on the project, 145 proposed evergreen shrubs, and 991 proposed deciduous shrubs. And in addition to all those plants, and of course the lawn, we've got just under 10,000 perennials and ground cover plants that are proposed as part of the project. So with that, I think I'd like to shift to telling you a little bit more about the lighting plan. Next slide. Okay, so what we have up here on the screen, sorry, is the technical lighting plan, and I should have mentioned the previous image was the landscape planting plan, sheet LP 101. Now I'm moving to the lighting plan, which is sheet LL 101. Thanks. So just a little overview of the lighting plan. We're deploying a collection of 4-foot tall, 12-foot tall, and 15-foot tall fixtures, depending on the location and the application. As was mentioned earlier by council, we do have one instance of light trespass along the southern property line, and I'll come back to that in just one moment. But we meet your ordinance's minimum foot candle requirements otherwise. We also meet your lamp color requirements, and of course the fixture heights as well. So the light trespass along the southern property line, pointing with my laser pointer, the railroad right-of-way is here. Really the genesis of this is that in an effort to preserve as much open space in the Great Lawn, our design called for the driveway leading back to the loading docks that were discussed by Mr. Savino. That driveway was pushed as far south on the page as we could to preserve the open space for use and enjoyment by Kenview employees. So we looked at several strategies for how to light that drive adequately without trespass, and we're challenged by the lighting along there with what I would call de minimis light trespass. I mean, if you get a close look at the technical plans, you can see the half-foot candle isolux or isotrace lines are just crossing the property line, and in the location here, which should be more evident in your package, there's a little bit of additional light that we needed to add at the gate.
Michael,
the gate.
and that area, though, that trespass onto a neighboring lot is the Conrail or railroad right-of-way. It is not a residential property. It's not another commercial property. Is that correct?
That is correct. So in my professional opinion, the trespass here is de minimis and may actually be slightly beneficial. If a trail is built there in the future, having a little bit of additional light there could be a benefit, in my opinion.
Okay. Can you just speak about the environmental efficiency of the lighting? Is it LED cutoff fixtures? Could you just speak to that, please?
Sure. All those fixtures are LED, full cutoff, with the right color intensity that you're all looking for. And again, much like the landscape plan being foundationed on selecting the right plant for the right place, here we're doing the same thing with the lighting. Like I mentioned earlier with the 3 general fixture heights, we're really trying to get the light to the ground where it's needed and not wasted. So this also, the lighting design is also supportive of our client's platinum goal for LEED.
Great, thank you. All right, that's all I have for Mr. Zura. Happy to answer any questions.
Any members of the board have questions of this witness? Rick?
Yeah, I have many questions, and I should preface it by offering congratulations. It's an ingenious plan. I like it a lot, but I do have maybe 10 or 12 questions about it's perfect, how do you change it? The LA is certainly the starting point for what one looks at with the egg-shaped green space. That's the defining element, and we'll start there. I would like to understand better why you think people will walk on the alley. It's pleasant to look at the trees. The renderings, bar none, show no seating. You've referred to seating. There's a narrative description of possible seating there. Why wouldn't you have seating? A lot of people would like to be able to walk there and sit down and have a conversation or enjoy being outside. Be more convincing if the renderings had seating, and if the seating looked comfortable. There's a narrative description of stone and concrete. There are even depictions of some of those. The Y-shaped benches look to be pretty hard surface. The only comfortable seating looks to be wood slats on top of walls, okay, but not in the LA. And then there's cafe seating, and the exterior workspace seating will come to that. So to start with, if you want to make the LA useful, especially for people with mobility issues or lower stamina, it would be great to make the seating a key element of the enjoyment of the LA, which is a great idea, by the way, the LA, that is. The LA doesn't seem to go anywhere. The narrative describes how it aligns, leads to the central corridor of the new building. Doesn't, kind of does, but when you get to the end of the LA near the proposed new building, it comes a little bit to the right if you continue the axis. And there's this sort of nebulous trapezoidal space labeled 08, forecourt garden between. I think that could use more explanation. The Y-shaped benches look weird, but they help to deal with the fact that there's a lack of axiality. It doesn't line up with the new building, and if it is meant to, there's really no indication of how the paved surface of the LA even gets to that forecourt garden and to the main entrance of the new building. So that may just be a rendering issue, but if it's a conceptual issue, it's if the LA is leading to the new building, and why wouldn't it? A lot of money, a lot of design effort. Where's it coming from, and what's at the other end? Why would you want to walk to the end of it? Proverbially, the shopping malls used to have magnets at both ends. There was a destination at both ends, and even at the University of Virginia and many other universities, there's an LA that leads somewhere. I don't see any particular elaboration of the amphitheater or seating at the far end of the LA. And it might be interesting to create a little pavilion there, a seating area, a destination. People get to the end of the LA and there's something special there. Maybe that's remote dining area, just more cafe tables. Something that gives a point to walking all the way down the LA and not stopping wherever there's an empty bench halfway down. That's the main thing about the LA, because it's the whole scheme. It's the heart of the scheme. There are many other good features, including things we'll mention in a moment. But I'm not convinced that the LA is fully resolved, at least in the renderings that are in the booklet and the drawings. Mention the seating. The oval itself, the egg-shaped oval, is described in the narrative, in the documents, maybe you mentioned it, as being 2/10 of a mile long, which is a nice trajectory to walk on. Close. With people who go for a walk, I don't run anymore, but I walk on an oval at Memorial Field, and it's exactly 400 meters, which translates into just under a quarter of a mile, 0.2485, I think, if I'm not mistaken. My point previously about too much parking, and could the oval have gotten slightly larger so that people who do want to walk a mile at lunch, or whatever length, know that it is a quarter of a mile and not 5 laps is a mile? Okay, it could be 5 laps, why not? But people are used to walking in an oval that's a quarter of a mile. I think that could easily be done. Maybe wrong, because it's constrained by not wanting to disturb the existing parking and the existing roadway. There's too much parking. The road shouldn't be determinate. There are many, many other things that are absolutely wonderful, and I'm just confused because they're not rendered adequately, and that may be the software, I don't know. But maybe there are also some conceptual issues that we could look at. The outdoor workstations are fantastic, great idea, and they look like they'd be a wonderful place to be outside with teammates on a work project. Very little about how they actually get used. You know, there's one rendering that shows some seating. There's some documents pasted on a wall surface. There's really nothing that describes how these are used. I'm imagining how they could be used. It would be better to know a little bit about that. Do we need to know that at the planning board? Well, I think the conceptual issue for me is that they seem very, very close together. If you look at little pavilion-like structures, you know, at the Parc de la Valette, Schumi, or other things that are, one could reference in terms of creating, you know, small-scale outdoor workspaces, enjoyment spaces, congregative spaces. How do they relate to each other in terms of acoustical spread? You know, are they in the right place? Are they benefiting from the cherry orchard? It was a little bit unclear about how those exterior workspaces were used. The narrative describes 12-month-a-year use of the exterior space. There are no winter renderings. There's nobody snowshoeing on the ILA. I assume that the workspaces are not used 12 months of the year, but if they're only used 3 months of the year or 6 months of the year, say so. And what happens the rest of the year? What grows on them, you know, under the cherry trees? Is there clematis or nothing? Is there lighting? Do people have to go all the way back into the building to use a bathroom? Last two things, if I might. You didn't describe it, and maybe it's a combination of landscape and civil, but when you have the food trucks or the tent, in the narrative it describes reinforcement to take the weight of those structures, and it talks about plastic reinforcement to take the weight of those structures. I didn't read the entire CanView website, but the environmental aspirations of the spin-off company are phenomenal. And I'd like to read one sentence, two sentences maybe, from the CanView website. Using materials that reduce our environmental impact, designing a process that decreases waste, incorporates more recycled materials, and makes our packaging easier to recycle or reuse. And obviously they're talking about Listerine and Tylenol and Band-Aid packaging. And then they go on to talk about our promise to reduce plastic usage. You know, your team. If there is not another way of making it possible to put a tent up, I'd be really surprised, and I would just encourage you not to use plastic underground.
Well, if I could just interject on that point, and I know you've provided a lot of comments. I might need the help of the stenographer to go back and review and address, but the rings we're talking about are recycled plastic rings.
Okay.
They're recycled from single-use bottle waste. So I think that is actually embracing
Okay.
CanView's
Well,
ideology.
you know, I didn't pick that up. I read the narrative pretty quickly today.
I'm glad you asked. So.
The narrative also talks about the possibility of other works of art other than the signature. How did you describe it? Logo-like. Well, it's not logo-like. It's the logo. You know, you can call it a sculpture. It's the logo. It's fine. You know, you arrive at the main door of the original building, the arrival court, the logo is there, fine. But is there going to be other art in the LA or elsewhere on the site?
Yes, there is, at this point, there are proposed to be 2 sculptures that are coming from the J&J archives, if you will, and they've been located on the site plan. You can see them there. But if additional information is desired, in other words, a photograph or other things like that, we'd be happy to provide that too.
I think it's the intent, you know, because logo, it doesn't quite make it beautiful, though the logo is. It's a nice design. It's a nice logo, but it's not art, you know, with respect. Last thing coming out of the commentary of others, the forester talked about potential conflicts between the demo plan on tree removal and the landscape plan. Have you addressed that one?
Yeah, in the compliance drawing set, we will be addressing those items. Mr. Linson also requested that trees to be removed would be marked with an X,
Yeah.
so we'll definitely comply with those recommendations.
And he's a really nice guy and very accepting.
He is.
Is there any way that some of the other large trees could have been saved, or does it destroy the geometry and the purity of the?
We felt that the ones that we are intending to preserve were really the best specimens. They were interesting, healthy A lot of the smaller trees that were located in and around the Alphabet Building were not all in the greatest of health, and frankly, trees like those that would need to be moved and relocated, survivability tends to drop pretty quickly on them. So the trees that we selected for preservation are actually staying in place
So it's not a
during
question of
construction.
changing the grade? I mean, I was inferring
Oh,
perhaps from
there's
the
some of
prior
that, too.
testimony that the elevations have changed a little bit.
The elevation of the Great Lawn will be similar to the elevation of the exterior grades in between the Alphabet Buildings today. But you're right, grading is also an issue.
And very last comment, and it's not so much on the trees as the shrubbery. The Environmental Commission reviewer points out that some of the shrubs that are delineated aren't native species, and she suggests possible alternatives. And I would just recommend those comments to your consideration. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you. If I could just address that, word to the Environmental Commission, we read the comments, and the comments that were made in the report, they appear to be based on a species list in an early conceptual design package. So the good news is, the bad news is the Environmental Commission did not review the application drawings as they are shown currently. But the good news is that we actually went and made a lot of those changes before they asked us to. So I think if they looked at the plan today, I would hope that they'd be satisfied.
The spirit of the project is absolutely in the right direction, and I'm quibbling at things that are suggestions on how to perhaps bring it to the next stage as the design gets developed rather than radically change it, except of course for the size of the oval.
Any other members of the board have any questions of this witness?
I would just follow Mr. Bell with, there can be little fish in the water feature? No, I'm kidding, because those were so thoughtful, those questions. I would say the zoning officer asked about uplighting with regards to flags and why there needed to be 6. Could you address that?
Sure, I'd be very happy to. Thank you. So,
And by the way, I thought that was wonderful. I was impressed, and it was so thoughtful. I was kind of joking about the fish, but I'm sorry, the uplights.
so on the record, no fish
Okay.
are envisioned. But the plan, as it stands today, envisioned 3 flagpoles. So there would be a New Jersey, a US, and a Kenview flagpole. So each one of those flagpoles has one light fixture associated with them. And then also, as was just mentioned earlier about the sculpture, or 2 sculptures rather, one of the sculptures, due to the shape and configuration of it, has 1 uplight, and the other sculpture has 2 uplights proposed to go along with it. So that's where that quantity of uplights comes from.
Okay, and I'm not familiar, but she does point out that any flag other than state or national, it appears.
Yeah, we would need a variance for that, for the 3rd flag.
Yeah, and that was listed in
Yeah,
your
yeah,
variances that you
Yeah,
gave.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman? Yes.
I had a question. Is this a water-intensive use for all this landscaping? I'm assuming you're going to have, is it going to be heavily sprinkled, the sprinkler system extensive throughout the campus? And what's the water source? Have you considered, rainwater sources and, reusable sources? And what's the standard? Or is it you're drawing from American Water?
Sure. Oh, good questions. So the current design contemplates the landscape areas to be irrigated, yes. I would say that they would not be considered intensively irrigated. It's a zone, it'll be a zoned landscape system. So lawn areas will be irrigated on a different schedule and at a different frequency than the tree and shrub areas. Our hope over time is that aside from the lawns, that the mature shade trees and other plantings will not need as much of the irrigation once it gets established, but it is a permanent irrigation system. In terms of source water, at this point, we're envisioning potable water being used for the irrigation.
All right. Is drilling a well an option even, or is it desirable, or not a?
I can't speak to that. It wasn't something that was investigated.
Any other questions from the board? Board professionals have any questions of this witness?
I have one that might help the board. The pictures look great, but how many years out from planning do they represent?
That's a good question. It's probably, I mean, the trees and shrubs that we're proposing today, we can refer back to the technical plans if need be. But we're, the elm trees, for instance, are, I believe they were at 6 to 7 inch calipers. So they're substantial size when they're going in. I would say, by and large, depends on the species, but most of the trees, the shade trees will be, you know, in the 16 to 20 foot tall range when they're installed. So to get back to your question about how long until it looks like that, that elm LA is very mature and very beautiful. That's probably at least 15 years out from a view like that. But my point about the size and the financial commitment that our clients are making is that the trees will not just comply with the ordinance, but in terms of their size, but will be pretty substantial on day one. And it'll look, the landscape will have good bones to it.
Thank you.
Cool.
Just as background, the ordinance often requires 2 to 3 inch caliber.
Yeah.
So 6 to 7.
It's much bigger, yeah. That's good. Any members of the public have any questions of this witness?
Okay.
We'll need to take a break in about a half hour at the latest. And so, you know, I guess you can do one, maybe 2 more witnesses. That's up to you. See how you can do that. I just want to let you know about 9:30, we generally
Okay,
take a break.
that's fine. So, Mr. Chairman, the next witness I'd like to call, or witnesses, are architects Taejun Jung and Richard Ashworth. But like I said before, most of the testimony will be given by Mr. Jung.
Okay.
Richard, you could come up. I'll go through the qualifications and you can sit there so that Richard can go through it. So Taejun, why don't you go through your qualifications first, then I'll bring Richard up to do it afterwards.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Taejun Jung, design principal, architecture design principal with Jacobs. I've been practicing since 1993. I have bachelor's in psychology from University of Michigan and master's in architecture from University of Pennsylvania. I'm registered to practice in the state of Pennsylvania. Also lead AP professional. Although I'm registered only in the state of Pennsylvania, I've done projects nationally, internationally. One of the significant projects in the state of New Jersey I've done is Campbell Soup headquarters down in Camden, New Jersey. And currently I have ongoing project in Rahway, New Jersey for Merck.
Okay. I'd ask if the board would accept Mr. Jung in the field of architecture.
Yes. Yes, sounds good.
Okay, and then I'll just qualify Mr. Ashworth just in the event his testimony is needed. So here, you can do it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Ashworth. I'm an architect. I'm the Director of Architecture for the Jacobs Philadelphia office. I have a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Utah, a master's degree in architecture from Rice University. I've been practicing architect for 35 years, 20 years with Jacobs. I've been a licensed architect. I've had my license in New Jersey since 2014, and we're ongoing projects in the state of New Jersey, so which with Taejun under construction now in Rahway, another one in Atlantic City, and hopefully soon in at the Port of Newark.
Great. Any questions? Yep, sure, go ahead. Yep.
All right, so Taejun, why don't we get started by going to these proposed elevations.
I'm sorry, before we do, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, council, am I correct in my understanding that Mr. Jung worked in conjunction with, supervised by, what have you, Mr. Bachelor, is it?
Ashworth.
Ashworth.
So
My
Mr. Jung and Mr.
So if you
Ashworth.
could just explain that,
Sure.
because Mr. Ashwood is licensed in New Jersey. Mr. Jung is not. It's fine, but I just want you to make that connection for the board on the record.
I'll make it clear. So Mr. Jung and Mr. Ashworth work at the same firm. Mr. Jung is the design professional who's been dealing with the day-to-day of this project. Mr. Ashworth is the licensed New Jersey architect that oversees the project to ensure compliance with all New Jersey requirements.
Right, from a legal perspective, that's illegal. Notwithstanding his lack of a license in New Jersey, he can testify, having worked with and/or under the supervision of Mr. Ashwood.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve. Okay.
Certainly, thank you.
So Tejan, if you can go through the elevations, just indicate the sheets that we're looking at.
Sure. The first image you see on the screen, this is a rendered elevation that shows the existing building L on the left-hand side and the new addition to building L on the right-hand side. So the north is to the left and south is to the right here. This view would be taken from where the Great Lawn is. These renderings were developed as part of our design process, and it does not reflect the landscape design that was just presented.
These are all in the deck of the 42 that you,
Yes.
42
should be.
drawings that you submitted previously. Have these drawings been,
No, these
identified?
aren't in the architectural sets. These are in what I submitted to the board as our exhibits for the meeting.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
I
I
just
think that's
wondered.
what the chairman's asking. This is all
That's-
part of A1. the
That's
power-
correct. That's all part of the 49 sheets.
49, I knew there was a bunch of them
Yeah,
in that.
sorry, Bridget.
Okay, A1, yeah, that's,
Yes.
okay,
One speaker, everybody.
sorry.
Sorry, Bridget.
We have to get our, cues straight, so when we speak,
Okay.
hand signals.
No, thank you for clarifying. Go ahead, Tejan.
Sure. As mentioned previously, the new addition to Building L on the right-hand side is 98,000 square feet, 3 stories. Although, from the Great Lawn view here on the west side, the building is 2 stories. The grade slopes away from this view, effectively making the building 3 stories on the east side of the facade. Next slide, please. So this is an isometric view showing the existing building L on the left-hand side and the new addition to the top and to the right-hand side. Again, the Great Lawn would be to the bottom right corner here. It shows the relationship between the existing and the addition. The new addition is placed about 30 feet away from the south facade of the existing building L. However, there are about 4 bays along the south facade of building L, which, right here, these 4 bays, approximately 110 feet. They will be renovated, opened up to provide a free-flowing connection between the 2 buildings so that the 2 buildings will function as one facility. The existing building L contains the lobby, which is located here. The new addition will not have its own lobby, since the intent here is that the 2 buildings will function seamlessly and symbiotically for Kenview. Okay. Next slide, please. This is a rendered elevation of the south side of the building. So the Great Lawn would be towards the left-hand side here, and this is towards the trees. So this is the slope and the ground that Mr. Savino had mentioned earlier. So the building 2 stories on the west side, as the ground slopes away, exposes the lower level of the building. And this area shown here is the loading dock to service the building. And up above is the primary research and development spaces that's planned for this building. Next slide, please. This is another aerial view from the opposite corner, Building L. The existing building is located here. The addition is shown on the left-hand side towards the bottom. The floor levels between the 2 buildings, they match on the first level, second level, and also at the roof level. It's not connected. The 2 buildings are not connected at the lower level to allow for site movement between the 30-foot space between the 2 buildings here. Also evident in this rendering are the 2 exterior or outdoor equipment yards. The one to the east here is a emergency generator to support the research and development function inside the building. The area to the left here on the south side, adjacent to the loading dock, is exterior equipment yard to support also the research and development function. One thing to note, and we'll go into further detail later on with the roof plans, here you see the rooftop mounted equipment to support the research and development work below. Sustainability, as mentioned earlier by other witnesses, is an important driver for this building. As such, quite a bit of air handling equipment will contain heat recovery systems for energy recovery, which does impact the size of some of these units. There's quite a bit of ductwork also on the rooftop to route all the ductwork down into the labs on level 2 and level 1. So the coverage of the rooftop equipment here is, on the addition, is 37%, which is 2% above the 35% allowance, which we're seeking variance. Another thing to note or to point out in this drawing are the two very large skylights. One here where the addition butts into the existing building L, what we call here the connector, and then here it'll be more clear when we get into the floor plans, but that divides the floor plate in half, and it's a long linear skylight here to provide natural daylight into the depth of the building.
Tejun, while you're up there, the zoning officer had asked in her report that we calculate the existing rooftop coverage and the proposed because there's a 15% limitation.
Right.
Have you done that, and what is the overall number for the one building?
There's a slide later on. We did that based on the best drawings we have of the building L rooftop equipment, and we're at 16% when we combine the existing building L with the addition.
Where 15 is required, so we're
15 is
1%,
required.
slightly over.
That's correct.
Okay, and then there was also a variance noted for a mechanical penthouse where 12 feet is required and we're at 12.7 feet. Can you just explain that to the board, please?
So that variance is referring to this stair tower here. This stair tower allows access to the rooftop, and given currently, our current design has the top of that stair tower at 12 feet 7 inches, so it's about 7 inches above. And the reason is the structure to support the roof of this stair tower here, and also the amount of insulation that we're adding to the rooftop of this building for energy conservation, we're ending up at 12 feet 7. We'll make an effort to lower this further, but at this stage, 12 feet 7 is what we're comfortable with.
And Tejun, that discrepancy or deviation is only in that southeast corner of the building?
Only on this location.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. The rest of the rooftop equipment, they're all at 12 feet or under 12 feet from the roof level. Next slide, please. So this is a rendered view of the new addition. The existing building L is shown here on the distance. Again, the grading that you see here is approximate, just to show the building elevation, not so much the landscape. So just to orient you, this is the loading duct we had mentioned. This is the lower level that's clad in this whitish, ultra high performance concrete panels. And then up above, we have level 1 and level 2. The overall architecture of the building, the intention here is to have the new addition to be in harmony with the existing building, which is clad in primarily glass curtain wall and brick spandrel panels. So the material that we're using in this building, although we're trying to develop the character of the new building to be sympathetic to the existing building, there are several decades that passed between the original building and the new addition. The building technology has improved, and also the understanding and desire for better performing building envelope is here. So most of the building enclosure is primarily a glass curtain wall. It's a high performance, low E coated insulated glazing unit with argon gas in the cavity for greater energy performance. And the reason for the primary glass enclosure here is this indicates all the people spaces on the first level and the second level. That's where the labs are, that's where the offices are. The intent is to maximize daylighting and also to allow as much view out as possible. And to address some of the solar heat gain issues, what you see here are some of the horizontal fins, projections to provide shading to the glass below, and also vertical fins here. That is a combination of metal and ultra-high performance concrete masonry unit that we're using here to provide shading on that glass surface. The glass itself behind will have a shading system to control the daylight in the interior side. The expression of where's masonry and where's glass is really an expression of the function inside the building. So here, this mass here you see contains stairs and other building core elements. The rest of the spaces are all occupied spaces with people behind them.
You want to jump into the floor plans?
Sure. Next slide, please. This is the lower level plan. Building L, for context, is located here. This is the new addition. This gray poche area is unexcavated area. So the lower level is a partial floor, and this level then negotiates the grade change really from west to east. The gray area that's shown here, these are the kind of building support areas and lab support areas, such as solvent storage, solvent neutralization, incoming utilities, elevators, toilet rooms. The loading dock is recessed so that the trucks would be parked inside the loading dock as much as possible. And the yellow area shown here is the circulation within that lower level space. And then the light blue area here is primarily storage space. We at Jacobs were responsible for the core and shell design of this building. The fit-out design is being done by another firm. So with that caveat, this area here, I'd like to point out, is about 3,000 square feet, and that's a new addition to the building that since our last submission. And the intent for this space is to be used as a storage space.
And they might have some refrigeration in there as well, correct?
Can you pause for a second?
Sure.
Just tell us a little bit about, you have a truck court or truck bay there. Are you looking at sort of box trucks and not 18-wheelers? What sort of?
Yeah, I was going to have Ms. Blair testify as the
Okay.
types of trucks and deliveries that you have. She's from Kenview, so.
All right, okay.
Okay. Also, I'd like to point out that this outline you see here, that would be the emergency generator that's located outside. And this area here is the equipment pad to support the building function as well.
The 3,000 square feet you are added, is that in any of the calculations we have, or it needs
No,
to be added to that?
no, it doesn't have to be. I spoke with Krista and to Mr. Burgess about it. It's not going to be finished space. It's just going to be storage
Okay.
with potentially some refrigeration. So it doesn't count to FAR. There's no expansion of the building. It's just going to have some electricity in there.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So the total square footage of this lower level is 20,000 square feet.
Okay. All right, why don't we go to the next floor
Next
plan?
slide, please. This is the first floor, first level plan. So building L, again, is located here, and this is the 4 bays that I had mentioned earlier that we're looking to remove the exterior enclosure and connect the new addition to create a free-flowing connection between building L and the new addition here. The beige area is generally the office meeting areas. So it would, the design of that area is being developed. But what you would anticipate would be that it would be enclosed offices, huddle rooms, open meeting spaces, and workstations for the scientists to sit outside of the lab setting to do their work. The blue area here indicates where the labs would be. It's based on a very flexible planning module. It's 10'6" module, meaning going across this way, that's 10'6". And this will not, as the design of the lab develops, there will be some enclosed labs, some open labs, and support labs, and so on. But generally, this is the area that's allocated for the research and development work. These areas here are the building core elements, such as toilet rooms, storage, electrical data rooms, and shafts to move air in and out of the lab here.
Is the 10'6" module the same module that you're using on the facade? That's your planning module, or is it not related?
That's the planning module. The facade module is a double of that, so it would be 21 feet.
Okay.
I want to go to the next floor plan, Tejun.
So this is the second level. It's pretty much the same as the first level. The first level is 40,000 square feet. The second level is 38,000 square feet. The 2,000 square feet difference is associated with some of the floor openings that we're providing here at the connector. Here it's a large kind of gathering space using communicating stair and bleacher type seating for people to gather, congregate for decent sized events. And then also down the middle here, where the offices and huddle rooms will be, we have a large floor opening and a communicating stair here to bring daylight from the skylight up above down to the first level. Okay. All right, next slide, please. This is the roof plan that we saw in the isometric view. The pink indicates the air handling units and the ductwork. The gray indicates the walking pads on the roof. Here's the long linear skylight through the middle of the building, and this is the larger skylight over the connector area.
And the walking paths are for maintenance purposes, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So altogether, we have about 37% coverage on the addition, on the roof of the addition here, which is 2% over. The next slide, please. But in the context of the existing building L and the new addition here, because the existing building is primarily an office building with a cafeteria and so on, their kind of mechanical requirement is much less. So they have, far fewer rooftop equipment combined between the two, between the existing building and the addition. We are at 16% coverage, which is 1% above the 15%.
And the additional items on the roof that you indicated were more were due to the efficiency and the LEED Platinum aspects of the project.
You mentioned the number 37% coverage. What does that refer to?
If you go back to the previous slide, please. So if you look at the overall roof area of the existing building and the areas that are colored in
I got
pink.
you. It's roof systems coverage.
That's correct.
And when you add the two together, the two buildings, you go to 16, which is just one above.
Right, where
All right.
15% is required. So Chris said since it's one building, do the overall calculation, and that's what we did.
Yep, I got it. Yep.
Next slide, please. So going to elevations, this was submitted earlier. We've colored these elevations for legibility for this hearing. And this elevation is the west elevation. So this is from the Great Lawn. The gray poche here represents, where the ground is, the imaginary cut line for where the ground is. So this shows, I think I just killed the laser pointer. But primarily, in terms of the character of the facade, on the left-hand side, that's the masonry material that we're using to, in that location, we have a stair there. That's ultra-high performance concrete piles. So the existing building is brick. Our decision here is to use ultra-high performance concrete, which is a very thin masonry material with integral color finish. It's manufactured in Pennsylvania, locally sourced. The existing building, although it's brick, they're using very large size brick, and the joints on the brick, it's called a stack bond, where all the vertical joints line up. Our intent here is to kind of bring that character over to the new building. So the joint pattern on the new ultra-high performance concrete panels will also be a stack bond with aligned vertical joints. And then the glass curtain wall on the right-hand side, again, it'll be high performance, low-E coated clear glass. The existing building is very dark black glass that's really not necessary with the advance in the glass coating system. So this building will appear much more transparent, more clear and open and inviting. But to mitigate some of the solar heat issues, we're proposing vertical fins and horizontal fins to control the sunlight. And then you see the rooftop equipment and ducts up above, all under 12 feet. This building, unlike the existing building L, will have a 3'6" parapet for fall protection, for safety of the people, maintenance people on the rooftop, whereas the existing building does not have that. So, next slide, please. This is the south elevation, and the gray poche is the slope of the ground on that side. The lower level, the gray area, is also the same ultra-high performance concrete panels, but there we're changing the color to more white, which will match the garage, which is white precast structure. So at the first level line, the coloration of the buildings will match between the addition and the existing. Next slide, please. This is the view on the east. Again, the lower level you see there. And then on the right-hand side, that's the angled or the canted, the connector portion that reaches out to the existing building L and allows for free connection, free-flowing connection. Next slide, please. And this is the north elevation. So the 4 bays shown, oh, right, it came back. So this area here represents the cut line where the new addition meets the existing building, 4 bays of 110 feet on both first floor and second floor. It died. And to the right of that is the new addition's north facade, which is primarily glass curtain wall. The stair you see is an exterior stair that negotiates or allows for people to move from the higher west side of the site down to the lower level on the east side of the building. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. So this perspective view shows the existing building L and the entrance on the left-hand side minus the sculpture. And then in the distance, it shows the existing, it shows the addition. And the intent here is, for Ken Views to create a complex with the existing building L and the new addition to work seamlessly and to work together. The new addition will house the R&D function and the needs for Ken View, whereas the existing building will then contain all the amenities such as cafeteria and also bulk of office spaces. So, and with that in mind, the characterization of the building architecture, they're sympathetic, yet they're not identical. We did not want to replicate the design of the building that's some 30, 40 years old. And we wanted to present a building that's sympathetic, but also expresses through more transparent glass the vibrancy of the activities inside, and allow more transparent view, of the great lawn and the trees, around the building.
Okay.
Great.
Great.
Thanks, Tejan.
Any questions from the board of this witness?
There was one slide right before the floor plan that showed an elevation of the rear of the building.
Yeah.
With the garage, and then there were these large steps that were sort of encompassing it just for the sake of design.
Which, let's go to,
There's going to be landscaping there, or?
could you go more?
That was it. Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah,
expansive.
those are 1-foot contours rendered that way. It's not, they're not actually steps as I read
Yeah,
it.
It's a contouring
it's a smooth-
exercise
yeah.
It's a
for
smooth-
design.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's a smooth slope. They're individual 1-foot contours, not intended to be steps.
Thank you, exactly.
Understood.
This was architectural model that we've developed.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions? Rick?
I appreciate the connection to the existing building and the referentiality without it being an imitation of something, as you said, that was from the past. That's the way to do it. I have a couple of questions nonetheless, starting with the fundamental gambit of tearing down existing buildings with all the carbon implications of even if demolition waste is reused somehow on site. Was there any consideration by the project team and by the client to reusing any of the existing buildings for new purposes?
You mean the Alphabet buildings?
The Alphabet buildings?
Yeah.
If you don't know, you could say you don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I've joined this project a few months ago, so that might have been discussed.
Unfair question,
Yeah.
I'll take it back.
Sure.
I've just been,
okay. I just didn't
like
want-
everybody else, reading about Marks and
You want
Spencer.
to start again, Mr. Bell?
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. There's a lot in the architectural press and various blogs about not tearing down buildings at all and reusing them. Marks and Spencer every day on carbon, not on aesthetics, not on functionality. If you look at what Marks and Spencer says about why they have to tear down Marble Arch, could be the same reason the Alphabet buildings. This is Marks and Spencer, not Ken View. Three poorly connected buildings, a warrant of dense structures and misaligned floors, not fit for modern customers or staff. So I question that. I don't know the buildings. I've never been inside of them, but it's a fundamental question. Was it the proximity of a new building? Was it the iconography, the imagery? What is it that is attractive to you as an architect about creating something new, even LEED Platinum, rather than trying to adaptively reuse to a different purpose what was there before?
Okay. Without knowing the exact history behind the decisions that had taken place, I did get a tour of the existing buildings. And I think there are a couple of reasons. One is Building L contains offices and amenities, and the new addition will have research and development spaces. You want those groups of people to, meet and collaborate. So the direct physical connection and proximity to each other would be a positive. And regarding the existing buildings, I've done a lot of research and development buildings, and in many cases, we do try to use existing, core and shell. I mean, it's a great deal of waste to just demo existing core and shell. However, lab, I mentioned 10-foot-6 planning module, and that planning module, kind of this very generic tabula rasa, is actually very useful in terms of flexibility. As the science changes, labs have to modify or to reflect the change in science. So the standard module helps, us to reconfigure the labs, move the walls, move the equipment. Typically, existing buildings, they may not have that module. So if it doesn't have, say, 21-foot structural grid, or something that's a multiple of 10-foot-6, now that structure then starts to interfere with the planning module. The floor-to-floor height is an issue because research and development spaces have a great deal of ductwork for ventilation purposes. If we don't have the floor-to-floor height, that's very challenging. And secondly, structural requirements. A lot of these labs have very sensitive instruments, and then there's a vibration criteria that we need to meet. So it might be that the existing buildings do not have that.
Thank you. It's a good answer, and I'm glad that's in the record. I have one other question on building systems. I was looking through the drawings a lot about the R&D shell space, and you could see from the roof plan, as you were describing in your narrative, the necessity for ventilation and lots of equipment, 37% roof coverage, understood, which makes it hard to imagine that a flat roof of this nature, well-oriented, otherwise might have solar panels because there's not much space left. But the other building certainly could, and so could most of the parking areas that are not covered by solar canopies, as other large corporate New Jersey employers have saw fit to do. Any thought on adding solar, or for that matter, with a large site like this, geothermal, into the building system mix?
I can't speak to the geothermal because that's I haven't really dealt with our HVAC engineer on that in that regard. We did consider solar panels, but I mean, as you could see, there isn't much roof left to provide meaningful solar panels. On the existing roof, that question, I could.
Yeah, I would have to ask the client more. That'd be a client question than to Mr. Jean.
Well, fair enough. And when you ask that question of the client, apart from the economics of it and the payback and all that, you have a lot of parking area, not all of which is always going to have
I don't disagree. I don't disagree that it could be explored.
So,
I don't know if it's something they want to
something
do,
to think about.
but it could be.
A suggestion rather than a criticism. Oh, sorry. A suggestion rather than a criticism. If there's an implicit criticism, is where's the solar?
No, understood.
We have to stop now and give our recorder a rest, even though there may be more questions from the board members. So we'll go from the board members to our professionals and then to the public. So we'll take a break here for 10 minutes and reconvene at, let's just make it 9:45. All right, let's reconvene our meeting here. Mr. Duval, do we have any more questions with regard to this witness from the members of the board?
I just had one quick question for you. You mentioned getting LEED Platinum certified, and if I missed it, I didn't hear that either of the architects working on the project do have LEED certification.
Yeah, Mr.
You do?
Zhang said he's a lead
Oh, I'm sorry, I
accredited
missed that.
professional.
Okay, that's okay, because I was just wondering who was leading that on the project, but clearly it's you. Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Any members of our consulting, of our board professionals, rather?
I just
any
have
questions?
one question. Correct me if I'm wrong, your mechanical equipment on the roof is 12 to 12 and a half feet in height,
No, 12 feet and below,
okay, 12
or
feet.
less, yes.
And the parapet is 3.5 feet.
That's correct, yes.
So it appears that a significant portion of the rooftop appurtenances will be visible. And have you done any studies to indicate for the board if such features will be seen off-site? I know you've got lots of landscape buffers around, but.
I think we talked about a sightline study, but having visited the site, especially on the east and the south, you know, there are very high trees that are well taller than the top of the buildings. The existing building L matches the height of the new addition. So we're pretty confident that none of that stuff is going to be really visible, you know, from the houses nearby.
Okay, I wanted to get that on the record.
Okay, great, thanks. Dipti, anything?
No.
Okay, all right. Any members of the public have any questions of this witness? All right. Mr. Duval,
Yep,
let's
my next
continue on.
witness is Angela Blair from Kenview. So she's our operational witness from the proposed tenant. And we swore Ms. Blair in, and she's testifying as a fact witness, not a expert, so I won't go through any
Okay, gotcha.
qualifications in that regard.
All right, thank you.
All right. So, Angela, before you get into your testimony, can you just state your position with Kenview and what are your duties and responsibilities in that role?
Yep, sure. Good evening, everyone. Angela Blair. I'm a Senior Director of Strategic Programs with Kenview in the Operations Organisation. So I was proud to be the first employee of Kenview in the Operations Organisation back in September last year before we'd separated from J&J, and was brought on to lead this project and a number of other strategic projects associated with separation. And so my role on the World Headquarters project, as we call it, is to lead end-to-end, right? So from design, construction, real estate, permitting, all the way through to operational readiness and handover and move in. In addition to which my role is also end-to-end within the business. So making sure any interdependencies within Kenview that are associated with the World Headquarters project are addressed and aligned from a timeline perspective. So things like our regulatory organisation, so our licensing, labelling, addresses on all of our products has to be relocated to Summit, New Jersey, from Skillman, New Jersey, or wherever they're relocating from. Other things working with like ESG, our sustainability and strategy organisation, making sure we align with the values that are being set up and our commitments from an environmental perspective are being met as we develop this project.
So Angela, you're fully familiar with all operational characteristics of Kenview and what they will be at this facility?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we walk through a little background of what Kenview is? It's a new company. I think the board would like to hear about it, and then some of the operational characteristics as well. So, Mr. Chairman, this is part of the exhibit that we provided. So, Ms. Blair is going to go through a summary of what Kenview is and then some of the operational characteristics.
Yep, so obviously Kenview IPO'd in May of this year. And slowly establishing who we are as an organisation, separating ourselves from Johnson & Johnson. This is our purpose statement, really realise the extraordinary power of everyday care. And that's what we're kind of building on as we go through this. And you'll see that and some of the values coming through in how we've approached the design of the World Headquarters project.
All right, so DJ, next slide.
So this is a little bit of an overview of Kenview, and I'm not going to kind of read through all of this, but we are the world's largest pure play consumer health company by revenue. We are extremely proud of our legacy with J&J and really deeply committed to our future in Summit, and really looking forward to seeing this world headquarters and bringing us under one roof, helping us achieve our future purpose. Okay, so this is just a view of our 3 segments. So we have kind of 3 key segments: self-care, skin health and beauty, and essential health. I'll just touch on each of these, right? So self-care is really kind of brands that I think many of you may be familiar with: Tylenol, Motorin, Benadryl.
Sorry, you're going to need to slow down.
Sorry. Yep. So some of the most recognized brands, particularly in the US, would be Tylenol, Motorin, Benadryl, Motrin. Motrin, sorry. Benadryl, Zyrtec, Nicorette. I can keep going, but I'm going to stop. Okay, and now self-care is about 40% of our business. Our skin health brands and beauty brands, key brands that you might recognize and hopefully have in your showers at home would be Neutrogena, Aveeno, OGX, our shampoo and conditioner, Lubriderm, and Rogaine. And then our final segment is our essential health brands, which many of us, I think, grew up with: Johnson's Baby, Band-Aids, and obviously Listerine. So shifting here, we just want to talk about our commitments, right? And I think that was referred to before in relation to some of what's been seen on our website in relation to sustainability. So we have a Healthy Lives commitment, which focuses on healthy people, healthy planet, and healthy practice, right? And the healthy planet piece is really something that we are trying to look at how we put that at the forefront of how we're designing and constructing this facility. So there was a question to our architect earlier around the demolition and the vision for the space. So the vision for our space is really to bring everybody under one roof. I think the demolition of the very old buildings, having assessed those, they did not work for what we were trying to achieve in terms of the vision. We currently live in a very old facility where we're quite separated, and both from a workplace perspective and also from the new R&D facility, the drive is to really bring people together, to make them collaborate, work together cross-functionally, and to have them under a single roof. And so that was the kind of key driver for selecting Summit and for looking at the R&D expansion. The other question, just one before we move on from sustainability, obviously we're focused on targeting to get LEED Platinum for the expansion, and we're also looking at net zero for the expansion. We are also, as part of LEED Platinum, exploring solar panels and what that will do in terms of helping us to achieve the LEED Platinum goals. No decisions have been made at this point. We're still in early phases of design. Okay, so project overview. I think Tajun did a great job just talking about what the building is in terms of the existing facility, which we will be continuing to use like it's used today as a workplace, and then the expansion of the new R&D facility with that target of LEED Platinum that we're striving for. Okay, and I'll touch a little bit about our workplace, and then I'll move on to a little bit about our research and development, and then get into operations. So this slide really talks about our values, right, and how we're incorporating those into our workplace. We have 4 key values at CanView. We put people first, we care fiercely, we earn trust with science, and we solve with courage. And I think that's being translated now as we kind of move through the design, set up our own kind of HR work policies and everything into how we're approaching the world headquarters and how people will use the space. So it's really going to be an activity-based work environment, so very flexible, right? Both in the office itself and also in the R&D facility. So you use the space when you need to use the space. You don't use the space when you don't need to use the space. And then I think this model will continue to evolve, right, as we continue to move through the design and continue to establish ourselves as a company and establish the CanView culture. And then within the research and development expansion, again, big shift in terms of how we're approaching R&D. So, you know, today in our existing lab facilities, they're really like brand focused. and we're shifting away from that into kind of a functional labs, right? So the labs create flexibility as our brands shift and grow, and as our projects associated with research and development change with science, right? We are really looking to integrate that level of flexibility within the R&D facility. And so these are the types of labs that we are incorporating into the R&D space, definitely with that layer of flexibility and that option for sharing, booking lab space and things like that, which is new in terms of our operations for how they run today. Okay, so this is an overview of kind of our facilities operations, and we're just starting to kick off our overarching strategy for how we're going to be running our facilities and standing up our facilities. And then as we obviously move into design and construction and get closer to handover and operation, right, those plans will continue to become more robust. So a lot of these are based on assumptions and how we use our interim headquarters today, right? And so I'll just run through from an operations perspective, and we don't see this changing. We are a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday company. All employees have access 24/7. If you want to work on a weekend and come in on a weekend, you can do that. But fundamentally, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday is the typical operating hours. There is no weekend work. There is no shift work. There's no manufacturing on this campus. We anticipate a range of 1,200 to 1,500 employees on site a day, and that's based on both current utilization data over the last 6 to 12 months, and we're seeing an increase rate as we've shifted to the interim world headquarters, and obviously we'll be monitoring that as we get closer to the move. And also based on security data, we have about 40 to 45 visitors a day anticipated. From a deliveries perspective, we currently have around 8 to 10 deliveries a day via small trucks, so that's the UPS, USPS, FedEx type deliveries. We have food deliveries as well. Today, in our existing campus, we have 2 separate cafeterias, 2 separate buildings, so there's a lot of streamlining optimization opportunities by us being under one roof. And as we move forward with the operational model and identified who our food services partners are, we'll have kind of a more robust approach for this, but this is based on current data. Okay, and then specialty deliveries, things like lab coats, uniforms, cafeteria linen, things like that will come about 3 to 4 times a week.
And Angela, I think the chairman asked, there's nothing, no tractor trailer deliveries. The largest vehicle will be a box truck.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, and then from a waste management perspective, again, this is going to be developed as we go through when we're shifting from decentralized R&D facilities that each order their own things. We're moving to a centralized location, centralized storage, including chemical storage that Tejun walked through on the first level of the adjacent to the loading dock in the new building. But this is, today we have a dumpster pickup weekly. We have recycling weekly. Electronic waste is ad hoc, quite often open up to employees to bring any electronic waste they also want to bring, and then shred it from a compliance perspective about once or twice a month. R&D waste, again, we're looking to manage that centrally. It's managed centrally today, although across multiple buildings, and so really that's been incorporated kind of into both the core and shell design, and we're developing out what that looks like, and obviously is in compliance with all necessary New Jersey codes, DEP. We have robust standard operating procedures, both from a chemical waste and a chemical storage perspective that is established and governed by our Environmental Health and Safety Department globally. And some of the waste includes biological waste, hazardous waste, flammables, acids, bases. Biological waste is typically associated with Listerine and saliva, with saliva samples, so that's something that we have as from a medical waste perspective. And I think that is...
With regard to the to the waste, did you have a conversation with anyone at the City of Summit with regard to the systems, what am I trying to say, the cleaning systems, you know, in terms of wastewater and, you know, the sewage treatment systems, sewage plant, is that a conversation that you have to
Yeah,
have?
I think that would be more of the site engineer would be able to
Yeah,
answer that. Do you
okay.
want Lenny to come up and just answer that very briefly?
Yeah, I was just curious as to whether you had to have some kind of interaction with the sewer authority
Yeah, I'll just have
effectively.
Lenny just
Yeah.
touch on that.
Yes, we are actually starting coordination with the joint meeting. And actually, today we had a kickoff call, so we are working through that process and making sure that we're actually holding and treating as necessary and then coordinating with them for whatever we have that's leaving.
Matthew, anything you'd add to that?
I do understand that did you meet with Aaron and Sam, or?
Not yet.
Oh, I
Yeah,
thought you
we
said
had
you
internal meeting just talking about
Okay.
what we're anticipating and
Yeah.
getting the process going,
Yeah.
essentially.
And obviously, this approval will be subject to all ancillary approvals. That would be one of them as well.
Sure.
That concludes my
That's it?
directive, Ms. Blair.
Okay, any members of the board have any questions?
I just have a quick question. So you mentioned Kenview starting new company. Is it still owned by J&J, a portion of it? How?
I believe, and I mean, check the press maybe. Sometimes they get it before I do, but I believe 80% of the shares are currently owned by J&J. Yep. And I think announcement has just gone out last week with both the J&J and the Kenview Q2 earnings, but I'm not in finance. Sorry.
And I'm assuming the property is going to be leased to Kenview or J&J?
The property is leased. The lease is signed under Johnson & Johnson Consumer Inc., which is a legal entity that was conveyed to Kenview.
And how long is the lease?
It is a 15-year with, I think, 3 renewal options.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Traval, I'm not sure if this is a question for Ms. Blair. Can you talk us through the timing of the development, the demolition, the new construction, the opening? I'm not sure which of your.
I think, let me get back to you on that, just in terms of how long it would take. I'll get back to you on that. I promise I will answer it.
So I have a quick question. I'm actually going to steal the question from Mr. Bell on the shuttle. They started to talk about the shuttle. I was interested in how that would work and what destinations would be included in that.
Yeah, I think the shuttle is going to be run by the landlord, is our understanding. I think the initial conversations we've had is really focused on Summit Station, although we will encourage people to use the trail to walk down to the campus, right? But yeah, I think that's been the focus, but I don't think we've obviously finalized those plans yet.
Thank you.
Joe and Dipty, any questions of Ms. Blair?
Just one. You had indicated 12 to 1,500 employees on campus, and how many visitors anticipated?
40 to 45.
And when we talk about the 1,600 parking spaces, now we're getting a better sense of why
Yeah.
they're doing what they're doing.
Lots of room for solar. So putting shuttle and solar to the side. I have one other S question, which is fascinating, the narrative, and on the landscape drawings to see the sports that are made available, sports fields, playing areas for beach volleyball, for bocce. Was that done by survey? How do you determine what your potential employees or current employees would prefer to do in their leisure time on site?
Yeah, it was not done by survey. And I think it's, I think there's some great facilities in Summit, right? So you've got the pool, you've got the sports fields up here. And so it was how do we identify what could be an activity that somebody could go out and do at lunchtime together. And within building L, the existing office building, we'll also be incorporating a fitness center.
Excellent. And the corollary question, and I kind of know the answer, the narrative is very clear about it, but it says no public use. Is that forever in concrete, or, when you have a bocce, where do you play bocce?
We'd have to talk to the landlord about that, because it implicates so many things from a liability perspective.
It would be great community relations to be able to open up a beautiful facility in the LA and everything for public use every now and then.
Yeah. Actually, a question to that point would be trail of Highland going into place. What's to stop the public from coming in and utilizing some of the grounds?
Like any private property, you'd have to have security on site that just monitors who's there. It would be like any private
property.
I do think the park line is going to be routed around the edge of the property. It doesn't cut through.
Intersection at all, okay.
Have you considered the fact that there's already a gym facility in one of the other buildings and using that or leasing
Yeah,
that?
so we are only leasing Building L and the ground lease for the R&D facility. So that would be a significant investment just to take on that entire building to use the facility, the gym facility.
Any other questions? Sure, Joe?
Yeah, if the R&D facility can come up with a quieter pickleball ball.
Get to work on that.
Part of essential care.
That's right, yeah. Any questions from the members of the public?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did
Oh,
have
sorry,
one,
yeah, sure.
one if I may, and it's an
Yeah.
omnibus question, because we're getting close to the end, to the last witness. There are a bunch of other reports. Anything you can't stipulate to, or do we understand you to stipulate to all the reports? Fire, chief, et cetera?
Yeah, I
et
don't think there
cetera?
was an issue, but I'll ask Lenny. No. Okay, Michael? Okay, I think we're good, Steve.
We're all?
Yes.
We're all, okay,
Yeah.
good. That'll help for the resolution.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Duval, anyone else?
Yes, our last witness is our professional planner, Greg Woodruff from Langen Engineering. And just to answer Mr. Brinkerhoff's question, the goal would be to commence demolition January 2024 with a 2-year construction period.
It's demolition in January.
Yeah, we'd have to work through all the approvals and then hopefully be done and have permits by January. to get everything.
24 months.
Yes,
So something like late 25 or early 26,
correct.
something like that.
That's the anticipated. Okay. All right, so are we ready for the
Yes,
last witness?
please,
Okay.
go ahead, yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is our last witness, our professional planner. So Greg, if you could just give your educational background, licenses held, and experience testifying before similar boards as a professional planner.
And your last name too, please.
Key piece of information. Last name Woodruff, Greg Woodruff, Woodruff.
Thank you.
I am an associate principal at Langen Engineering. I am currently licensed as a professional planner in the state of New Jersey, as well as through the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've held my license since 2008, have been accepted as an expert in professional planning before many boards. I haven't had the experience of testifying before this board, but have appeared before many throughout the state in those years.
Educational background, I guess, just in general?
Sure. Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Science from Muhlenberg College, master's degree from Villanova University.
Great. Any questions? Let's go ahead, yeah.
All right, Greg, just before we get started, you visited the site and the surrounding area?
Correct, yes. I was actually there, fortunately, with some of the board members when they were able to visit the site the other day.
All right, and you reviewed all of the relevant ordinance provisions as well as all the application materials that have been submitted?
Yes,
All right, and you've heard all the testimony that's been given this evening?
yes.
Okay, so why don't you give an overview of the relief that's sought and the justifications that you believe are there for the variances? In addition, can you please explain why you believe an amendment to the GDP is justified in this situation?
Certainly. So I'd like to start with the GDP, if everyone's okay with that. You've heard quite a bit of testimony about the history of the site. There's quite a history to the GDP, or the General Development Plan, as well. First adopted in 2006, amended over time. Our office prepared and submitted a report, the amended GDP, that covers all of the required sections. I wasn't going to go through it, in the interest of time. I wasn't going to go through it in detail. If there are questions, we can try to address those. But I believe the report addresses all the relevant sections. In general, we've heard a description of what's being requested, why the amendment is necessary. I think the amended provisions of the GDP are in keeping with the original intent of the GDP. There's just been an evolution over time of the property. This is the future of the property, and accordingly, the GDP needs to be amended to characterize what those differences will be moving forward for Kenview versus what was envisioned in the original GDP and the amendments that have been approved to date. So relative to the GDP, from a planning perspective, I think the amendment is, significantly consistent with the original intent, and again, is just an update necessary for this user.
Okay, and you believe that all the items required under the ordinance as well as the MLUO for the GDP have been satisfactorily submitted?
I do.
Okay, Great. All right, so why don't we go into the variances that we're seeking as part of the site plan?
Certainly. So you heard quite a bit of description from the various professionals about the specific variances that are being requested. I'll just restate them for the purpose of sort of outlining where I'm going to go. The first bit of relief that we are requesting relates to the maximum height. You heard Mr. Savino go into quite a bit of detail about the calculation relative to the building height. There are multiple ways to calculate that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. You heard the project architect talk about the roof coverage numbers, the calculations for the roof coverage with the mechanicals. We are requesting a variance related to that exceedance. You also heard discussion of the steep slope issue relative to the ordinance requirement relative to development on steep slope areas, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. And then there are the two variances that pertain to lighting. One being the slight exceedance on the property at the property line, and the other being the uplighting for the flags. I apologize, I failed to mention, we also need it's a related height variance, but for the stair tower, that exceedance of 12 feet 7 inches, whereas 12 feet is allowed. So I apologize for not calling those out separately. As the board is well aware, and I'll talk in more detail at each variance, but the MLUL essentially defines two proof methodologies whereby the variances can be justified. The C1 criteria, where in layman's terms there's sort of some existing unique condition that drives that nonconformity. The C2 criteria, in layman's terms, essentially meaning a balancing test whereby the benefit of that deviation or variance outweighs any detriment or perceived detriment. So I'll talk a little bit as I go through as to what I think from a planning perspective is the justification or justifications for each, but that's just sort of level setting for those terms. So I'd like to start with the slope disturbance variance that we need. You heard the engineer talk about sort of the existing steep slopes, what meets that steep slope definition, those limited areas. They are sort of right around the existing developed building L and some of that space right behind there. We heard the intent of that ordinance is really about preventing erosion with the redevelopment. That while there is work in those steep slope areas, there's not, from a planning perspective, from my perspective, a concern about there being additional erosion. Those areas are going to be stabilized. They're going to be redeveloped. It meets the intent of the ordinance, even though technically there are steep slope areas that are being disturbed based on the definition.
And in fact, based on Mr. Savino's testimony, they're being reduced from what exists today.
I was just going to say, and the other sort of positive aspect from a planning perspective is that those amount of steep slope areas actually decrease as a result of the redevelopment. So I would justify that under the C2 criteria that I mentioned, whereby the benefit of that reduction and the benefit of the overall stabilization in the finished condition in conjunction with the redeveloped building addition outweigh the detriment of working in those areas, which they are really just steep slope areas, adjacent to developed areas anyway. I don't think that was the intent of a true definition of a steep slope that might be in danger of eroding on a site from an ordinance perspective. Relative to the building height, we heard quite a bit of testimony about the exceedance of the allowable building height. It's really a de minimis height exceedance in the first place, and it really is, I would say, it probably could fit under a C1 or a C2 justification from a planning perspective. The site is unique. I mean, you have, as Mr. Savino described, on the order of 30 feet of grade change from one side of the building to the other. So that one technical calculation method whereby you create the exceedance is really driven by that unique feature. If you went by the other two calculation methodologies, there wouldn't be a height variance needed. Again, I would say it's de minimis, but I also think it's driven by the unique character of the site. From the C2 criteria perspective, as you heard the architect testify, the building addition was specifically designed to match the building height of the existing building. So from an overall feel of the height, in my opinion, from a planning perspective, the building will perceive to be the same height across from the existing building L to the addition. So from my perspective, I don't see that as an issue from a planning perspective.
And that area where it deviates is exists today. So even if this
Correct.
weren't being built, that condition would still be there.
Correct, correct. Relative to the height for that stair tower that you heard description of, in my opinion, that falls squarely under a C2 criteria, whereby the benefit of having that stair tower create access to the roof, you're only exceeding the allowable by 7 inches, and as you heard the architect say, it might be possible that that's going to come down anyway, but is really being driven by the desire to add some additional insulation and other features like that that are really positives for the building design. As we heard description of, and as can be clearly seen on the aerial, or just your guys' knowledge of the site as you go around town, it's really hard to see into the site. So a 7-inch exceedance of that stair tower is going to be imperceptible to anyone other than the people who work there. So I think in this case, clearly the benefit of that additional 7 inches for all those reasons outweighs any perceived detriment of the exceedance. And then the last two, relative to the lighting, I would sort of lump those together because I think they both pertain to, technical deviations from the lighting ordinance. But again, because of I'll use the word remote nature of the site or screened nature of the site, I don't think from a planning perspective there's a negative impact from them. I think the benefit of providing a little bit of additional light at the perimeter circulation road, which was really driven to create more open space in the middle, far outweighs the little bit of spillage at the property line that would result, especially considering that property line is to what essentially will be a trail right-of-way in the future. And similarly, the uplighting of the flags and the other sculpture features, I think the benefit of lighting those features outweighs the detriment. Again, in this case, you have a site that's fairly remote, well screened. You're not going to be creating light spillage to neighbors or having glare entering someone else's windows or whatever else might be some examples of negative impacts of these sorts of lighting measures. So relative to the positive criteria, I think there's...
No, it's okay. Just on the roof again, we have the 15% permitted versus the 16%.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
okay.
I mentioned that and I skipped over that one. Again, we heard testimony relative to the calculation of the roof coverage for the mechanicals. When you average it out across the two buildings, it's an extremely de minimis amount of additional roof coverage, and those mechanicals are really to support the additional sustainability measures from a mechanicals perspective for the building. So from a planning perspective, I don't perceive an issue with that de minimis exceedance. I think the benefit of having that higher quality HVAC design would outweigh the fact that you exceed by what ends up being in the aggregate 1% of the roof area.
And then lastly, I'm assuming from a planning perspective, you don't have an issue with an additional flag if Kenview's flag were to go in addition to the state and national flags, that would have any negative impacts on surrounding properties?
From a planning perspective, no, I would not think that would have an impact similar to the line of planning logic that I talked about a moment ago relative to the nature of the site, how well screened it is. It really is just for their corporate presence and the imagery of their campus here, their headquarters here.
Got it. Thank you.
So relative to some of the positive criteria, and I'll try to move through this quickly because I know I'm getting to the end here. I think there's a couple purposes of zoning that all of these variances further. First, purpose A, to encourage municipal action to guide appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. I think clearly the redevelopment or the reinvigoration of this site with an R&D, a world headquarters R&D facility, furthers that purpose pretty squarely. I think the design overall, in addition to that, we heard about the significant amount of pervious area that's part of the design, the open space, the thought that's gone into the building, and its connection to the landscape. I think it clearly furthers that purpose. I would also note purpose G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses according to environmental requirements to meet the needs of New Jersey citizens. I think Summit, the benefit of Summit getting to keep a corporate headquarters here in an office space is significant relative to locating uses appropriately. It's an existing corporate campus. Getting to reinvigorate it with a company of this stature is significant relative to the needs of certainly the citizens of Summit. And then purpose I, to promote desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. To me, from a planning perspective, the care that was taken with the landscape design in this case clearly furthers that purpose in addition to the overall building design. Relative to the negative criteria, obviously the two criteria requirements are that there's no substantial detriment on the public good, and that there's no substantial impairment or on the intent of the master plan or the zoning ordinance. Relative to the public good, I don't believe the proposed development or the improvements would have detriment on the public good. The campus is an existing office campus. It's being reinvigorated. There's going to be a building addition that will allow it to function as it moves forward as such, while incorporating quite a bit of additional open green space. And you get quite a bit of consolidation of that development footprint to create that additional open space. Relative to the existing master plan and zoning ordinance, clearly the amendment to the GDP and the overall goals of the master plan are furthered. There's a couple that I'd highlight. Goal 1, the guide development to maintain and enhance the character of Summit. Obviously, this campus is part of the character of Summit, so getting the opportunity to have it to continue here clearly furthers that goal. And Goal 5, to build an economic resiliency by supporting reinvestment. Clearly, reinvesting in this campus furthers that goal. So with that, I would say, in my opinion, from a planning perspective, the variance requests are justified and can be granted.
Yeah, and you see no substantial detriment from a stormwater, lighting, traffic perspective at all?
None.
Okay, so in your professional opinion, the benefits of granting the variances would substantially outweigh any detriments?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that concludes my directive of our planner.
Any members of the board with questions of this witness? And any member of our consultant team or our board professionals, any questions of this witness?
No questions. Quite impressed with the logic that was being presented. There was only one item that I took issue with. And I agree with you about the height in the C1 physical features test, because the 30-foot differential, the topographic differential, that made a lot of sense. The fact that the building might not have been, the same physical dimension, as you extend across the roof of the building. I'm not sure how much of a C2 variance condition that is when you can't see it from outside the campus. But other than that, everything was very good.
Okay, great. Dipty, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, a couple quick, if I may.
Sure, yes.
The MLUL 45.6 addresses revision of general development plan. It says it may be amended or revised upon application by the developer, approved by the planning board. Not a specific condition or standard, I should say, for the board. That's just something that's missing in statute. All of the mandatory elements of a development plan were provided in the amended general development plan that was submitted March 31, 2023 for the record, so I would confirm what was stated by the planner. Also, all the discretionary components were also submitted, with the exception of one, a housing plan. It's discretionary, but I think the reason stated was there was a waiver for that because the non-residential development fee is not anticipated to be required. Therefore, the housing plan, even if it were required, wouldn't be necessary in this particular case. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We'd still have to comply with the non-residential development fee if it applied, but I think in this situation, because you can take a credit for the existing structures that are on, and we're demolishing more square footage than we're putting on, we would not have to pay that fee.
Right, and I don't think the board needs to address whether that is accurate or not. That'll be a determination made statutorily by an other
As we
individual
say-
as opposed to this entity.
Yes.
But I think it's probably sufficient from a legal perspective to have that waiver request made under the circumstances, and certainly the board has the discretion to grant it. As to the relief, I just need a quick scorecard here because
Yeah,
there
sure.
was some relief in the notice and in other reports that may or may not have been necessary, and we didn't quite get the quantification of all the
All right,
relief.
I'll go through it right now, so you have it perfectly for the resolution.
You know where I'm going.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
All right, no, that's fine. So it's always good to be really precise on all this. So we have the steep slope disturbance variance. We have building height.
Wait, steep slope greater than 15%, do we have a quantification of how much?
Yes.
I'm checking I think it was just, yeah, okay, sorry, okay. It's .56 acres. Is that correct? Just hold on. I'm just gonna have Lenny confirm that, but
Sure.
that's one.
No, we could run through them. And this way, when assuming the board grants, they've granted the exact
Yeah.
relief request.
Yeah, I'm looking at the zoning table. So then the next is the building height,
Yeah.
where we deviate from that one provision. We're at 68.5, where 65 is permitted.
Yeah.
Okay. Then,
I'm sorry, yeah, 65 feet, right.
yeah,
Go ahead.
65 feet is permitted, okay. Then we have the rooftop coverage, 15% permitted, 16% proposed.
And that's for the average of the two buildings, correct?
That's correct, because now it's one building.
Right.
The zoning officer recommended we calculate it as a whole, okay? Then there's for the one roof appurtenance, at 12.7 feet, where 12 feet is permitted.
That's the stairway, right?
Correct. Okay. Then there is the lighting spillover onto the right-of-way, the railroad right-of-way.
And did we get some sort of quantification of that?
Michael can check me, but I think it's .1 foot candle.
That's what I saw in the notice, I think, or somewhere. While they're looking, we can keep moving. We'll be
Okay.
efficient.
And then the other is having the 3 flags.
Right, and if I understand
the
correctly,
uplighting
it's
on the
really
flag-
It's
and
the
the-
uplighting on one flag, that's the issue.
Yeah, correct.
I don't know when he's gonna stop. So I could start. Go ahead, so uplighting on the one flag, that's the Kenview flag. That's the one deviation. Okay, please keep going.
I believe I believe we confirmed, I believe that's it, Steve. And then the steep slope, I was correct on that number. It was .56.
Right.
And then I'll just hold for Michael's.
And while we're holding, just to make sure, then there is, in the notice, there was one for siting of a structure within 10 feet of a steep slope area. That's no longer required?
Yeah, that was not flagged. I think we noted that conservatively, but it wasn't flagged by the planner or by the zoning officer.
Okay, and the combination of fence and retaining wall not to exceed 10 feet was testified to that you are in compliance.
Yeah.
So even though that was in the notice, it's not required, correct?
We conservatively cited that, but we confirmed we're fine.
And then maximum height of wall signage greater than first floor was referenced by, I think, our zoning officer at one point. Is that a deviation that's necessary or not?
So on the building, because what the zoning officer had stated was, since the signage will not be visible from a right-of-way, it would not count as signage. That was the interpretation. So again, that was just, again, to conservatively cite it.
Okay, so as long as that's not required, then you've covered everything I had on my potential list. So is it .1 foot candle, that's the deviation?
It's really tough to see, the drawings are so small.
That's
Can
okay.
we settle for a higher number, say not to exceed?
In the planner's note here, he uses .1 foot candles.
Yeah, that's what I stole. Yep.
So that's on the 5th page.
I thought with the lighting, you could always just make it work.
We'll go with .1 foot candle or thereabouts if that's what the applicant is requesting.
Okay, so .1 is okay, Michael?
No, it's very conservative. I think that's gonna be higher, and
Okay.
At least 2-foot candles. Again, I'm sorry, it's very hard to read through.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
not point 2 or 3, but 2 or 3. 2-foot candles.
okay. Okay.
All right, then that's what's being requested, 2-foot candles.
Well, and given where it is, Joe, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Okay, we got it. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we didn't quite finish in the sense, is there anyone from the public that has any questions of this witness? And then, Mr. Duval, do you want to close at
Yes,
this point?
I know it's procedural, but you just want to open it up to the public for
Yeah.
comment?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I
Just-
meant to do
just
that.
to be
Here are
safe.
my notes, yeah, thank you for reminding me. Any members of the public have any comments or questions with regard to this witness? All right,
All right, I'll be very brief.
Yeah, please.
I just want to first thank the city's and the board's professional staff and administrative staff. They've been wonderful guiding us through this process. We've had meetings, a lot of hard work went into this application before the board saw it, and I want to thank them for assisting with that process. I think, the applicant and the tenant and the professionals kind of made this easy for the attorney when you have such a well-put-together application with, a goal for LEED Platinum building, decreasing impervious surface on the property, providing this green lawn, the EV charging stations, all of the infrastructure that's being put in here is clearly within the intent and purpose of the GDP. The variances that you saw, although there were several, they were all fairly de minimis in terms of their magnitude over what's required. We agreed to comply with all of the professional reports that were noted by various professionals and agencies within the municipality. With that, Mr. Chairman, I respectfully request that the board first vote and grant the GDP amendment that was requested by the applicant in our comprehensive submission that we provided and based on the testimony of the witnesses and our professional planner. And if the board is so willing, inclined to do so, grant preliminary and final major site plan with the variances that we sought as part of this application. And I thank the board for letting us go for about 3 hours. I really appreciate it.
thank you. Are there any members of the public that have any further questions at all? So we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing at this point. Public hearing is closed, and we're now available for board member deliberation. Anyone have any preliminary thoughts, comments,
Just to be
ideas?
clear, Mr. Chairman, we're going to break it up into the 2 votes as requested by the
Oh,
applicant.
is that right?
The
I
first
know
one
we talked
simply-
initially about doing a combined, but
Yeah.
you want to do 2 separate votes.
Yeah, I think the applicant asked for that, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
argue with the applicant. I
Okay.
think that's the
All right.
appropriate way to handle
Okay,
it. They are 2 different decisions. So the first is simply whether or not to grant the amendment to the general
GDP,
development
yeah.
plan. I referenced the lack of a standard, but in the law, but certainly well within the discretion of the board to grant.
And then our second vote, and again, this would be all roll call votes. Our second vote would be based on the preliminary and final site plan.
And I think
The
as a
second vote
matter,
would be for preliminary and final site plan approval and bulk variance relief, the
Yep.
7 variances that we just went through, which I can repeat if and when you need them.
Yep.
And that would be with all the conditions stipulated to by the applicant, including but not limited to all the comments and requirements set forth in the various professionals' reports, and I won't go through them all.
yeah, and the GDP timeframe would be based on what's in the ordinance, which I think is 10 years is what it was.
Right, that's what was.
That's
you
your
were-
request.
Yes, that was the
right, you
request.
requested
Yep.
10 years.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
And GDPs can be as long as 20,
that's true, that's correct.
Okay.
FYI.
Okay, the board members understand that we're essentially going to have 2 different votes here and 2 different items. Any questions? Maybe we'll just look at questions. Have first questions related to the GDP amendment. Does anybody have any questions with regard to the amendment and the extension? With regard to the preliminary and final major site plan approval, any with the variances approved, any questions, comments?
I would
Thoughts,
just say,
processes?
though, to Steve's point, the NRDF certification form would still be completed,
100%.
whether or not it results
It would-
in any kind of...
Legally, it has to be.
Yeah.
Please finish that thought, Mr.
Yep.
Delory.
No problem. The result of that algorithm would then determine the fee, but that it would be completed.
Yes, that's correct.
And
Thank
this is
you.
reference to the housing.
This is affordable housing fees
Yes,
as part of a commercial entity and development. Thank you.
Any comments or questions with regard to that. Well, I'd like to say, just in general, Mr. Duval, and to the members of Summit East Corporate Property LLC, and Kenview in particular, we really appreciate the tremendous presentations you put on here tonight. The level of professionalism and quality is outstanding. So we are just thrilled to death that you're going to be your corporate headquarters here in Summit. I use lots of your products at home. My family bulks up on those, so that's a good thing. And so we appreciate the tour that we got this week as well. And I'd like to entertain, if someone would make a motion with regard to the proposed GDP plan amendment.
So moved.
And a second?
May I just add, for a second, I'd
Sure.
just like to say, to provide for some who have not been involved, as long as some of us have been, given the change in ownership of the property, given the change in tenancy, well, there wasn't a tenant before, obviously, because the lawyers, Belgian were owners, it makes all the sense in the world, I think, and certainly based on what I heard tonight, to give this group collectively an opportunity to maximize for their benefit, but also for the benefit of Summit, the development of the site. And what I heard tonight, I would expect that. And I'm very pleased to suggest that we grant this extension of time, allow them to make the changes that are appropriate.
Absolutely. All right, did I get a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, second, and I guess we'll do a roll call vote.
Sure. Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Councilmember Miniger,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Good, thank you. Mr. Warner, would you like to recap with regard to our second vote with regard to the preliminary and final major site plan approval? What
Right.
we're technically voting on?
Yep, again, preliminary and final major site plan approval and bulk variance relief, including the steep slope exceedance of .56 acres, the building height deviation of 68.5 feet versus 65 feet, the rooftop mechanicals average of two buildings, 16% versus 15%, one roof, stairway, 12.7 feet versus 12 feet maximum permitted. The lighting trespass over the railroad, or railroad right-of-way, that spillage at, we're going with 3-foot candles, right? The uplighting of the Kenview flag, as well as the having a flag that is not a state or U.S. flag. We have, bear with me. Keep track of it. Was there also, though, the 30?
Did you get the building height, Steve?
I got the building height 68.5 versus 65. Didn't we also have the one rooftop of 37% versus 35?
no.
But we're only doing it for the average. Then I think we got them all.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, I appreciate
Sure,
that.
with all, and I'm assuming if it's a grant, with all stipulated to conditions, all the conditions and items set forth in all the professionals and staff reports.
Great, thanks. That's a mouthful. Someone offer a motion to approve?
I move that
All right,
we
thanks.
approve.
And a second?
A second.
All right, thanks. And roll call vote, Stephanie.
Sure. Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Councilmember Miniger,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all very
Thank you.
much. Yep, you did a terrific job.
Are there any
Appreciate it
new
very much.
Listerine flavors coming?
All right, board members, we still have two resolutions to,
Two more to approve?
two resolutions to review.
Oh, yes. We left that for
I
the,
don't think we, you guys, I don't think we need to stay. I think we can go ahead and take off now. Have a good trip. Bon voyage. see you next month. Maybe not next month. Okay, well, we have to do what we have to do, right? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
You want the final, yeah, you're gonna get the draft. Oh, yeah, yeah, she sends us the final, so we asked Stephanie to do something.
Okay, really figure out we'll
Check.
have, we'll be able to. DJ, thanks. Good to see you. Okay, so we have a little quiet. We have two resolutions that we have to review, the 39 Beechwood Road Summit Sport and Spine, and the 556 Morris Avenue, Bristol Myers Squibb, one that we did last time we were together. So, anyone have, on the first resolution, anyone have any comments, corrections, deletions with regard to 39 Beechwood Road Summit Sport and Spine? Steve did another amazing job as usual. This was just a preliminary. The following resolution was the real challenge. So any comments, questions? Do we need to do a voice vote or do we need to do a
Roll call.
roll call vote?
Please.
Okay. So may I have a motion to approve the resolution for 39 Beechwood Road?
And Stephanie, I don't have, so if you can cross-check who's eligible.
I have it.
Thank you.
I need a
I move to approve that.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, second, Andy, thank you. And we'll do a vote now.
Sure. So our eligible voting members are Chairman Anderson, Mr. Brinkerhoff, Ms. McNeil, Mr. Delory, Councilmember Miniger, Vice Chairman Zucker, Mr. Formicelli, Mr. Bell, and Mr. Hillebrand. Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Councilmember Miniger,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
and Mr. Formicelli,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, with regard to the 556 Morris Avenue, which is basically our Bristol Myers Squibb resolution, anyone have any comments, additions, or deletions to that? That one was a challenging one to a great extent, Steve, so I appreciate that. It's really well done. So may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
John, and a second?
Second. Second.
Andy? Okay, great, thank you.
Wait, I'm sorry, who seconded?
Andy.
Andy.
Andy
Gotcha.
Miniger.
Okay. Okay, so our eligible voting members are Chairman Anderson, Mr. Brinkerhoff, Ms. McNeil, Mr. Delory, Councilmember Miniger, Vice Chairman Zucker, Mr. Formicelli, Mr. Bell, and Mr. Hillebrand. Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Councilmember Miniger,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries, yes.
All right, great, thank you very much. One last piece of business. We think we'll have a meeting next month on August 21st is a question I put to Stephanie. She thinks we may.
I think we may.
Okay, so we try not to have one in August and give everybody a break, but in this case, we have some school board,
We do, we have two school board ones, it's the middle school and the high school.
and if we don't approve them by the 21st of August, the kids can't go to school, so.
What are we heroes? I can't tell my
A lot of happy kids.
I can't, I only have one left. I can't. She's got to go. She's got to get out.
Gotta get them out of the house.
She's got to finish and get out.
Okay, all right, well then, we'll wait to hear from you, Stephanie, on that. Thank you all very much for staying here tonight, such a long meeting. This is really a great event, having here at Summit to get this thing leased up and have, you know, basically our corporate headquarters, or
Yeah.
global headquarters here in town. It's, you know, a lot of it has to do with, frankly, our geographic location. We're, you know, lucky to be here where we are. On the other hand, it has a lot to do with the great work that our council and others, mayors have done over the decades, and the citizens of Summit have volunteered and made this place such a great place to live. So we're very fortunate, but we're also very happy to have them here.
Yeah.
So, thanks, everybody, and we'll see you in August.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Good night, everybody. Enjoy your night.
Thank you.